When your boss asks why you won't look at her, and the truth could destroy everything you've built, what do? Daniel Mercer stood in that corner office on a Friday evening, his career hanging by a thread, his heart pounding against his ribs. 3 months of carefully avoided eye contact. 3 months of professional distance masking something dangerous. And now Lillian Hart, the woman who controlled his future, demanded an answer he couldn't give without risking it all. This is the story of what happened when silence became impossible. Before we begin, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels across the world. The fluorescent lights in Morrison and Associates hummed their usual monotonous tune, casting sterile white across Daniel Mercer's desk as he stared at the quarterly report without really seeing it. The numbers blurred together. Revenue projections, cost analyses, profit margins, all of it background noise to the one constant thought that had colonized his mind for the past 3 months. Don't look up. Don't look at her office. Don't make this harder than it already is. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. 10 years of corporate experience guiding them through formulas and forecasts while his mind wandered dangerous territory. It was 6:47 p.m. on a Friday, and the 15th floor had emptied hours ago. Most of his colleagues had rushed out at 5 o'clock sharp, eager to start their weekends. Daniel had volunteered to stay late, finishing the projections that were due Monday morning. It wasn't dedication that kept him here. It was strategy. Staying late meant avoiding the morning meetings where Lillian Hart reviewed departmental performance. It meant skipping the afternoon briefings where she walked through their wing, her presence like electricity in the air. It meant he could maintain the careful distance he'd constructed between them, a distance that felt more fragile with each passing day. The sound of a door opening shattered his concentration. Daniel's hands froze over the keyboard. He didn't need to look up to know who had just stepped out of the corner office. He could feel it, that shift in the atmosphere that happened whenever she was near, like the pressure change before a storm. Daniel. Her voice carried across the empty floor, professional and measured, but there was something underneath it, a tension that hadn't been there 3 months ago. He kept his eyes fixed on his monitor, watching her reflection approach in the darkened screen. Ms. Hart, I thought you'd left already. I had some contracts to review. Her footsteps stopped a few feet from his desk, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle with notes of jasmine that he'd started associating with sleepless nights and guilt. It's almost 7. You should go home. Just finishing these projections, he said, forcing his voice to remain steady. Another 15 minutes. Silence stretched between them. In his peripheral vision, he could see her standing there, arms crossed, those razor-sharp heels she always wore making her stand just tall enough that his seated position put them at eye level when he... Don't look up. Daniel, can we talk? 4 words. 4 simple words that sent his heart rate spiking. About the Henderson account, he asked, grasping at professional territory. I have the preliminary numbers ready for... about you avoiding me for 3 months. The air left his lungs. His hands slid off the keyboard, coming to rest in his lap, where she couldn't see them shaking. The screensaver kicked in, replacing the spreadsheet with slowly drifting stars, and suddenly he had no excuse to keep staring at the monitor. I don't know what you mean, he said quietly. My office. Now. It wasn't a request. Daniel stood slowly, buying himself seconds to construct some kind of defense, some plausible explanation that didn't involve the truth. But as he finally met Lillian Hart's gaze, every rehearsed excuse evaporated like morning mist. Her gray eyes held something he'd never seen there before. Not anger, not confusion. Hurt. Debt. The walk to her office felt like miles instead of yards. Daniel's mind raced through the past 3 months, cataloging every interaction, every carefully maintained boundary, every moment he'd engineered to avoid exactly this confrontation. It had started innocuously enough. A company mixer in November, the annual pre-holiday gathering where management pretended to be human and employees pretended to enjoy cheap wine and cheaper conversation. Daniel had attended out of obligation, planning to make an appearance, shake a few hands, and escape home to relieve his sister from babysitting duty. He'd been standing by the windows overlooking the city when Lillian Hart had approached, 2 glasses of wine in hand. You look like you'd rather be anywhere else, she'd said, offering him a glass. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who feels exactly the same way. She'd smiled then. Not the corporate smile she wore in meetings, but something real and slightly melancholic. I'm Lillian Hart, your Daniel Mercer from Strategic Planning. You know my name? I know everyone's name, it's my job. She gestured to the crowd behind them, though sometimes I wish it wasn't. They'd talked for an hour, not about work, not about quarterly targets or corporate strategy. She'd asked about his son, 8-year-old Jake, who was currently obsessed with dinosaurs and convinced he'd discovered a new species in their backyard. Daniel had asked about her late husband, gently, and she'd surprised him by answering honestly. It's been 2 years, she'd said, staring out at the city lights. Everyone expects you to move on, to be back to normal by now. But what they don't understand is that normal disappeared with him. You're just creating a new version of it, and it never quite fits right. Daniel had understood completely. His wife hadn't died, but she'd left when Jake was 3, deciding motherhood wasn't what she wanted after all. 5 years of single parenthood had taught him exactly what Lillian meant about creating new normals that never quite fit. That conversation should have ended when the mixer did. Instead, it had continued into weekly coffee runs that turned into lunch meetings that somehow shifted from professional to personal without either of them quite noticing when the line blurred. Until the morning Daniel had walked into a strategy session, seen Lillian presenting at the front of the room, and felt his stomach drop as he realized the truth. He wasn't just enjoying their friendship anymore. He was looking forward to seeing her with an intensity that terrified him. He was thinking about her during his commute, during his son's soccer practice, during the quiet hours after Jake fell asleep when the house felt too empty. He was falling for his boss, and that realization had triggered 3 months of self-imposed exile. Chat. Lillian's office was corner real estate. Windows on 2 walls offering a panoramic view of the city transitioning from day to night. The skyline glittered against the deepening blue of twilight, countless office windows illuminated like earthbound stars. She closed the door behind them, and Daniel felt the click reverberate through his chest. Sit, she said, moving around her mahogany desk. I'd rather stand. Daniel, if this is about my performance, he interrupted, desperation making him reckless. The Henderson projections will be ready Monday morning, and the quarterly analysis is ahead of schedule. I know I've been less visible lately, but the work speaks for, why won't you look at me? The question hit him like a physical blow. He stood there, 6 feet from her desk, hands shoved in his pockets to hide their trembling. Outside, a plane's lights drifted across the darkening sky. Inside, silence pressed down like a weight. I look at you, he said weakly. No, you don't. Lillian's voice was quiet now, controlled, but something raw edged beneath it. 3 months ago, we were friends. We talked. We laughed. You looked at me like I was a person, not just your department head. She paused, and he could hear her breathing, measured but slightly too quick. Now you can barely stand to be in the same room. You avoid morning meetings. You skip the Thursday briefings. When we pass in the hallway, you find somewhere else to be. I've been busy with, don't. The single word cut through his excuse. Don't insult me with professional justifications. I want the truth, Daniel. Did I do something? Say something? Because I've spent 3 months trying to figure out what I did to make you pull away. And I can't. Her voice cracked, just slightly. I can't think of what it was. The crack in her composure destroyed something in him. The careful walls he'd built, the professional distance he'd maintained, the protection he'd constructed around them both. All of it crumbled in the face of her thinking she'd driven him away. Daniel closed his eyes, drawing in a long breath. When he opened them, he forced himself to do the one thing he'd been avoiding for months. He looked at her. Really looked at her. Lillian Hart sat behind her desk in a charcoal blazer and cream blouse, her dark hair pulled back in its usual professional style. At 42, she carried herself with the kind of quiet authority that made junior executives nervous and board members respectful. But right now, in the soft light of her desk lamp, with her carefully maintained composure showing hairline fractures, she looked vulnerable in a way that made his chest ache. You didn't do anything wrong, he said quietly. Then what is it? It's that when I look at you, he stopped, searching for words that wouldn't destroy everything. I forget. Forget what? That you're my boss. The confession escaped before he could stop it. When I look at you, I don't see the executive who controls my career. I don't see the woman who can fire me with a signature. I see, he faltered. What do you see? Her voice was barely a whisper. I see the woman who stays late because her house feels too empty. I see the person who remembers that my son likes dinosaurs and asks about his latest discoveries. I see someone who understands what it's like to build a new normal when the old one disappeared. He met her eyes fully now, past the point of retreat. I see someone who makes me feel alive again after years of just surviving. And that terrifies me, Lillian, because feeling that way about your boss is a catastrophically bad idea. The confession hung in the air between them, irreversible and raw. Lillian didn't move, didn't speak. The only sound was the soft hum of the building's ventilation system and the distant wail of a siren somewhere in the city below. Finally, she stood, moving around the desk with careful, measured steps. She stopped a few feet away, close enough that Daniel could see the rapid pulse at her throat. "Do you know why I asked you to stay after the mixer that night?" she asked. He shook his head, not trusting his voice. "Because for 2 hours I'd been watching you check your phone, counting down the minutes until you could leave. And I recognized that look, that need to escape from forced cheerfulness into something real." She paused. "I thought maybe we could escape together just for a conversation, something genuine in a sea of corporate performance." "Lillian, I'm not finished." Her gray eyes held his. "You think you're the only one who's been terrified for 3 months? When you started avoiding me, I told myself it was for the best. We'd gotten too comfortable, too familiar. The boundaries were blurring, and someone needed to restore them. I convinced myself you were being smart, professional, protecting us both." Her voice dropped. "But the truth is, I missed you. I missed our conversations. I missed having someone who saw past the executive armor to the person underneath. And I hated myself for missing it because feeling that way about someone who works for me is a catastrophically bad idea," Daniel finished softly. Yes, the word was barely audible. They stood there, 3 feet of charged air between them, both afraid to move closer and unable to step back. "What do we do?" Daniel asked. Before Lillian could answer, her phone buzzed on the desk. Then his buzzed in his pocket. The synchronization was eerie, ominous. Lillian reached for her phone, and Daniel watched her expression shift from vulnerable to guarded in an instant. The executive mask slammed back into place, but not before he saw the flash of fear. "What is it?" he asked. She looked up at him, and in that moment, he knew whatever fragile hope had just bloomed between them was about to be crushed. "It's an email from Human Resources," she said quietly. "There's been an anonymous complaint about inappropriate conduct between a senior executive and a direct report. They're requesting formal interviews." She paused, her knuckles white around the phone. "Starting Monday morning." The descent from hope to dread happened in the space of a heartbeat. Daniel pulled out his own phone, confirming what he already knew. The same email, same corporate language, same implications that felt like a noose tightening around his career. An anonymous report has raised concerns regarding workplace conduct between Lillian Hart, VP of Strategic Development, and Daniel Mercer, Senior Analyst in Strategic Planning. In accordance with company policy, HR will conduct formal interviews with both parties and relevant witnesses beginning Monday, March 18th. Until this investigation concludes, both parties are advised to limit professional interactions to essential business communication only. "Who would report this?" Daniel said, more to himself than to her. There's nothing to report. We've been careful. Too careful." Lillian was already moving, her mind shifting into crisis management mode. "It doesn't matter if there's nothing concrete. Perception is enough. Someone saw us having coffee too many times, or noticed that we talked more than strictly necessary, or simply decided that any relationship between a VP and an analyst was worth investigating. This is my fault." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, panic clawing at his throat. "I should have been more distant, more—" "This is no one's fault," Lillian interrupted sharply. "We haven't broken any rules. We haven't crossed any lines. But we wanted to." The admission hung between them, undeniable and damning. Lillian sank back against her desk, the executive armor cracking again. "Wanting isn't a crime. In this situation, it might as well be. Daniel's mind was already racing through the implications, the professional calculus that would determine who fell and who survived. You know how this plays out. HR will interview everyone. They'll find nothing concrete because there's nothing to find. But the investigation itself will raise questions, create doubt. And when they can't prove misconduct but can't entirely dismiss the concerns either, they'll make a recommendation, which will be that one of us transfers to another department. And since you're the VP with a decade of institutional knowledge, and I'm the senior analyst who's been here 3 years, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Lillian's jaw tightened. They can't force you out over unproven allegations? They won't have to force anything. They'll make it clear that my continued presence creates an uncomfortable situation. They'll suggest that a fresh start would be best for everyone. And technically, they'll be right. The bitterness in his voice surprised him. I'm a single father, Lillian. I can't afford to be unemployed while I fight a battle I'll probably lose anyway. So you'll just quit? I'll do whatever I have to do to make sure my son has a roof over his head and food on the table. He met her eyes. Even if that means walking away from... He stopped, unable to finish. From what? She pressed. From the first person who's made me feel like myself again in 5 years. The confession stripped away any remaining pretense. They stood there in her office, the city lights casting long shadows across the floor, both knowing that Monday morning would begin a process that would tear apart whatever they'd almost had. Lillian pushed off from the desk, closing the distance between them until she was standing close enough that Daniel could see the gold flecks in her gray eyes. I won't let you fall alone, she said fiercely. If this costs you your job, I'll fight it. I'll go to the CEO myself. I'll say, and destroy your own career in the process? Daniel shook his head. You've worked too hard, sacrificed too much to get where you are. I won't let you burn it all down for something that was never even allowed to begin. Don't I get a say in what I'm willing to risk? Not when the risk is everything you've built. Lillian's hand came up, hovering near his face but not quite touching. You don't get to make that choice for me. Someone has to be rational here. Rational? Her laugh was hollow. We're standing in my office after hours, having confessed feelings we shouldn't have, facing an investigation that could ruin us both. And you want to talk about rationale? Her hand dropped. Maybe I'm tired of being rational. Maybe I'm tired of choosing safety over living. Lillian, my husband died in a stupid random car accident on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, she said, her voice intense. One moment he was texting me about dinner, the next he was gone. And you know what I learned? That you can do everything right, follow all the rules, make all the safe choices, and lose everything anyway. Her eyes glistened. So maybe I don't want to make the safe choice this time. Daniel felt something crack open in his chest. What are you saying? I'm saying that Monday morning, when HR calls us in for those interviews, I'm going to tell them the truth. Which truth? All of it. That we became friends. That those friendships developed into something more. That we haven't acted on it because we knew the professional implications. And that I'm requesting a voluntary departmental transfer to eliminate the conflict of interest. Daniel stared at her. You'd give up your position? I'd request a lateral move to a different division. Same company, different reporting structure. She smiled slightly. It's not giving up. It's choosing a different path. They might not approve it. Then we fight harder. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. But I'm not hiding anymore, Daniel. I'm not pretending these feelings don't exist just because they're inconvenient. I did that once already. Spent the last 2 years pretending I was fine, that I didn't need anything or anyone, that work was enough. And it was slowly killing me until you walked into that mixer and reminded me what it felt like to actually connect with another human being. Hope and terror warred in Daniel's chest. If we do this, if we actually try, we could lose everything. We could, Lillian agreed. Or we could gain something neither of us expected to find again. Before Daniel could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Both of them froze. Sudden awareness of how this would look crashing over them. Alone in her office after hours, standing too close, having a conversation that was definitely not about quarterly projections. The footsteps slowed, stopped outside the door. A knock shattered the tension. Lillian stepped back, professional distance snapping into place like armor. Come in. The door opened to reveal Marcus Chen, the company's CEO. At 58, Marcus carried himself with the kind of easy authority that came from 30 years of climbing corporate ladders and surviving every attempt to push him off. His gray suit was perfectly tailored, his expression carefully neutral. Lillian, Daniel. He nodded to each of them. I'm glad I caught you both. Daniel's stomach dropped. Of course Marcus would know. The anonymous complaint would have crossed his desk first, probably within minutes of being filed. Marcus, Lillian said smoothly, her voice betraying nothing. We were just finishing up some projections for Monday. At 7:30 on a Friday night? Marcus's eyebrow raised slightly. Your dedication is admirable. He stepped fully into the office, closing the door behind him with a soft click that felt ominous. But I suspect we both know I'm not here about projections. Silence settled over the room like dust. Marcus moved to the windows, hands clasped behind his back as he studied the city below. I received an interesting email this evening. An anonymous complaint alleging inappropriate conduct between a vice president and a senior analyst in her department. He turned to face them. I'm assuming you've both received notification of the investigation? Yes, Lillian said, just a few minutes ago. And I suppose you're both preparing your defenses, constructing professional explanations, maybe even considering resignation to avoid the mess? He watched them both carefully. Am I close? Daniel said nothing, unwilling to confirm or deny while his boss's boss stood 3 feet away. Marcus sighed. Let me tell you a story. 20 years ago, I was a divisional director, ambitious and hungry for the next promotion. There was a woman in my department, brilliant, creative, someone who challenged me to think differently. We became close, too close by corporate standards. And when rumors started, I made what I thought was the smart choice. He paused. I transferred to another office, across the country. Eliminated the conflict of interest completely. That sounds like the right decision, Lillian said carefully. It was the safe decision, Marcus corrected, but it wasn't the right one, because in choosing my career over the possibility of something real, I lost both. The transfer derailed my momentum, new city, new colleagues, starting over, and I lost her because distance and time and career ambitions eventually killed what we'd started. He met Daniel's eyes. She married someone else, had a family, built a life, and I've spent 20 years wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to fight for it instead of running away. The confession hung in the air, unexpected and deeply personal. Why are you telling us this? Daniel asked quietly. Because I see you making the same choice I did. I see you preparing to sacrifice something real for something safe. Marcus moved back toward them. And I'm here to offer you a third option. Which is? Lillian's voice was carefully controlled. Daniel, how would you feel about a promotion? The question came out of nowhere, disorienting in its unexpectedness. What? We have an opening in the data analytics division. It's a director-level position, significant step up from senior analyst. The role reports directly to me, not to strategic development. Marcus looked between them. If Daniel accepts, there's no conflict of interest. He's in a different division, different reporting structure, different department head entirely. Hope sparked in Daniel's chest, dangerous and fragile. You're offering me a promotion to eliminate the investigation. I'm offering you a promotion because you're qualified for it and because it solves multiple problems elegantly. Marcus's expression was unreadable. The anonymous complaint becomes moot if the professional relationship no longer exists. HR closes the investigation before it really begins, and you both get to keep your careers intact. And our personal relationship? Lillian asked. That's between you two and whatever company policies govern interdepartmental relationships, which, I might add, are considerably less restrictive than those governing direct reporting relationships. Marcus moved toward the door, then paused. The offer stands until Monday morning. If you accept, we'll make the announcement first thing, effective immediately. The investigation disappears like it never happened. Just like that? Daniel couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. Just like that. Marcus opened the door, then looked back. But understand something. I'm not doing this to be romantic or because I believe in love conquering all. I'm doing it because I've watched both of you work for years. You're talented, dedicated, and valuable to this company. Losing either of you over an anonymous complaint based on perception rather than misconduct would be a waste of resources I'm not willing to accept." He paused. "What you do with the opportunity is up to you, but at least you'll have the choice I never got." He left, closing the door with a soft click. Daniel and Lillian stood in silence, processing what had just happened. "Did that actually just happen?" Daniel finally said. "I think so." But Lillian moved to her desk, sinking into her chair like her legs could no longer support her. "Marcus Chen just offered you a promotion to save us both. It sounds too good to be true." "Maybe. Or maybe it's exactly what he said. A practical solution to a resource problem." She looked up at him. "The question is, do you want it?" Daniel thought about Jake, about the stability this promotion would provide. A director-level salary would mean better schools, college savings, maybe even a house instead of their small apartment. It would mean security for his son, but it would also mean accepting a solution that felt like charity, like being rescued instead of fighting his own battles. "I don't want to be saved because the CEO feels guilty about his own past," he said. "Then think of it differently." Lillian stood again, moving around the desk to stand before him. "Think of it as the universe offering you a path forward instead of a dead end. You're qualified for the position. Marcus wasn't lying about that. You've been handling director-level work for the past year anyway. While reporting to you, which is exactly why this works, you've already proven you can handle the responsibility. This just makes it official and removes the ethical complications." She reached out, her hand finding his. "Take the promotion, Daniel. Not for us. For Jake. For yourself. For the career you deserve." Her hand in his felt like both an anchor and a lifeline. "And then what?" he asked. "We start dating, navigate whatever this is between us while the whole company watches to see if the rumors were true?" "We figure it out as we go," she said simply. "Like everyone else who's ever tried to build something real." Daniel looked down at their joined hands, thinking about all the careful distance he'd maintained for 3 months, all the times he'd avoided her eyes to protect them both. And he thought about Marcus's story, about choosing safety and losing everything anyway. Maybe courage wasn't about avoiding risk. Maybe it was about deciding which risks were worth taking. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay? I'll take the promotion." He squeezed her hand gently. "And then we'll figure out the rest." The smile that broke across Lillian's face was worth every moment of terror, every professional risk, every uncertain step forward into unknown territory. Outside the windows, the city continued its Friday evening transformation. Workers heading home, restaurants filling up, life moving forward in its endless cycle of routine and surprise. And inside that corner office, two people who'd spent months avoiding each other finally allowed themselves to imagine a future neither had expected. "We should go home," Lillian said, though she didn't move. "It's late." "We should," Daniel agreed, also not moving. They stood there for another moment, hands still joined, savoring the fragile hope that had somehow survived the evening's revelations. Finally, reluctantly, Lillian stepped back. "Monday morning. Fresh start." "Monday morning," Daniel echoed. As he left her office and walked through the empty 15th floor, Daniel pulled out his phone and texted his sister. "Running late. Be home in 45. "Everything okay with Jake?" Her response came immediately. "All good. He's asleep. Take your time." In the elevator descending to the parking garage, Daniel caught his reflection in the polished doors. He looked different somehow, less guarded, less careful, like someone who'd been holding his breath for 3 months and finally remembered how to exhale. His phone buzzed with a new message. Not from his sister this time. "Thank you for being brave enough to tell me the truth." "Bus L," he typed back. "Thank you for not letting me run away from it." The elevator doors opened to the garage, and Daniel stepped out into the cool March evening. Somewhere above him, Lillian was probably still in her office, organizing her thoughts for Monday's announcement. Somewhere across town, Jake was sleeping in his dinosaur-themed bedroom, dreaming whatever 8-year-olds dreamed about. And somewhere in the uncertain space between now and Monday morning, Daniel's life was about to change in ways he couldn't fully predict, but was finally ready to embrace. He slid into his car, started the engine, and headed home to his son, carrying with him the weight and wonder of a confession that had somehow survived its own destruction. The weekend ahead would be sleepless, anxious, full of second-guessing and what-ifs. But underneath the anxiety, there was something else. Possibility. The chance to build something real instead of hiding from it. As Daniel merged onto the highway, his phone lit up with one more message. Sleep well, Daniel. Monday, we start fighting for this. Together. L. He smiled despite himself, despite everything, and drove home through the Friday night traffic with a lightness in his chest he hadn't felt in months. Behind him, the Morrison and Associates building stood against the night sky, its windows glowing with the lives and decisions of everyone still working late. And on the 15th floor, in a corner office with 2 walls of windows, Lillian Hart stood looking out at the city and wondering what Monday morning would bring. Whatever it was, she wouldn't face it alone. And neither would he. The weekend descended on Daniel like a slow-motion storm, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Saturday morning found him in the kitchen at 6 a.m., unable to sleep, staring at coffee he'd forgotten to drink while his mind replayed every word of Friday night's conversation. "Dad, you're doing the staring thing again." Daniel blinked, finding Jake already dressed in his soccer uniform, cleats dangling from one hand. 8 years old and already too perceptive for his own good. "Sorry, buddy. Just thinking about work stuff." "Is work stuff why you smiled at your phone like 17 times last night?" Jake grabbed a banana from the counter. "Aunt Sarah said you were acting weird." "Your aunt talks too much. She also said you probably met a girl." Jake made a face like he'd tasted something sour. "Which is gross, but whatever makes you less boring, I guess." Daniel couldn't help but laugh. "I'm boring? You watch documentaries about tax law, Dad, for fun." Jake stuffed half the banana in his mouth. "That's like definition of boring. Those documentaries are fascinating. See? Boring." Jake grabbed his water bottle. "Come on, we're going to be late. Coach hates it when we're late." The soccer field was chaos, as always, 28-year-olds running in approximately the same direction while parents shouted encouragement from the sidelines. Daniel found his usual spot on the bleachers, coffee finally in hand, watching Jake sprint after the ball with the kind of fearless enthusiasm that only children possessed. His phone buzzed. "How's your morning?" L. He stared at the message, that same smile Jake had called out creeping across his face. 3 months of carefully maintained distance, and now they were texting on Saturday morning like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Watching my son play soccer. Yours?" Pretending to review contracts while actually wondering if Monday will be a disaster. "Cold feet?" The response took longer this time. Daniel watched Jake score a goal, pumping his small fists in celebration before his phone lit up again. Terrified feet, but not cold ones. "You?" "Same. Jake just called me boring, which is apparently what happens when you watch tax documentaries." "You watch tax documentaries? They're surprisingly interesting." "Daniel, I'm reconsidering everything." He laughed out loud, earning curious looks from nearby parents. His phone buzzed again. "Kidding. But we might need to expand your entertainment options. Is that an offer?" The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Daniel held his breath, aware that they were crossing into territory that felt dangerously close to flirting. It might be. Once Monday is behind us and we're no longer violating corporate policy just by texting. How long until that's not a violation? Approximately 36 hours. But who's counting? Daniel smiled at his phone, and this time he didn't care who noticed. On the field, Jake's team celebrated another goal, their joy uncomplicated and pure. Daniel wished adult life could be that simple. See the goal, chase it, celebrate when you score. Instead, it was texting the woman you were falling for while calculating the professional and personal risks of every word. "Your kid's got good footwork." Daniel looked up to find Marcus Chen settling onto the bleacher beside him, dressed in weekend casual that probably cost more than Daniel's entire wardrobe. The CEO held a travel mug and wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky. "Marcus?" Daniel's pleasant morning evaporated into immediate tension. "I didn't expect to see you here." "My grandson's on the opposing team." Marcus gestured toward a small boy currently trying to tie his shoe while the ball rolled past him. "He's not quite as focused as your son." They watched in silence as the game continued, the incongruity of the moment not lost on Daniel. sitting on suburban bleachers discussing youth soccer with the man who held his professional future in his hands. "I meant what I said Friday night," Marcus said finally. "The offer stands. No strings, no hidden conditions. You're qualified for the position regardless of personal circumstances. With respect, sir, the timing makes that hard to believe." "Fair enough." Marcus took a long sip of coffee. "Let me be more direct then. I've been watching you for the past year, Daniel. The Henderson analysis you put together saved us from a merger that would have cratered our stock price. The market expansion strategy you proposed, the one Lillian presented to the board because you didn't have the seniority to present it yourself, that's generating real revenue now." Daniel said nothing, unsure where this was going. "You're talented, you work harder than people twice your salary, and you do it all while being a single parent." Marcus paused. "That kind of dedication and capability doesn't come along often. I'd be an idiot to lose it over an anonymous complaint that amounts to absolutely nothing." "It's not nothing if it damages Lillian's reputation. Lillian's reputation is built on 15 years of exceptional performance. An investigation that finds no wrongdoing isn't going to change that." Marcus turned to look at him directly. "But your defensiveness about her reputation tells me everything I need to know about whether the anonymous complaint had any basis in reality." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Sir, relax, I don't care." Marcus returned his attention to the game. "What I care about is that you're both valuable assets to this company, and I'm not about to let corporate policy kill something that could benefit everyone involved, professionally and personally." "You're saying you approve?" "I'm saying I'm giving you both the tools to navigate this without destroying your careers. What you do with those tools is up to you." His grandson finally got his shoe tied and immediately tripped over it. Marcus winced. "But if you're asking my personal opinion, life's too short to let fear make your decisions." Jake scored another goal, and Daniel automatically cheered, his mind still processing Marcus's words. "Monday morning, 8 a.m., we'll make the announcement," Marcus continued. "You'll have the weekend to decide if you're accepting." "But Daniel?" He stood, brushing imaginary dust from his slacks. "Don't let my story scare you into making the same mistake I did. Sometimes the brave choice is also the right one." He walked away toward the other team's sideline, leaving Daniel alone with his thoughts and a soccer game he was no longer fully watching. His phone buzzed again. "Everything okay?" "You went quiet." Daniel looked at the message, thought about Marcus's unexpected appearance, about the choice waiting for him Monday morning. "Everything's fine, better than fine, actually. I'll explain later." Cryptic. "But okay. Enjoy the game." He pocketed his phone and forced himself to focus on Jake, who was currently doing some kind of victory dance that involved far too much hip movement for an 8-year-old. Normal life, simple joys, the present moment instead of the uncertain future. But underneath it all, a certainty was building. He was going to accept the promotion, and whatever came after, he and Lillian would face it together. The game ended with Jake's team winning by 3 goals. In the parking lot afterward, Jake chattering about his performance while demolishing a post-game snack, Daniel made a decision. "Hey buddy, how would you feel about going out for dinner tonight? Somewhere nice?" Jake looked suspicious. "Like restaurant nice, or dad thinks pizza is nice? Restaurant nice. Are you dying?" "What? No. Because you never want to go to nice places. You always say they're overpriced and we can make better food at home." Jake studied him with unsettling intensity. "So either you're dying or something big happened." "Something big happened," Daniel admitted. "But good big, and I want to celebrate with you." "Does good big mean more money?" "Potentially." "Then I want the place with the fancy mac and cheese." Jake grinned. "And dessert." "Deal." That evening, dressed in the closest thing to formal wear they owned, Daniel and Jake sat in a restaurant that definitely qualified as overpriced. But watching his son's eyes light up at the menu options, seeing him try to use his napkin properly because the setting demanded it, Daniel felt something settle in his chest. This was what the promotion would mean, not just better finances, but the ability to give Jake experiences beyond their careful budget. Soccer camps instead of just rec league. Summer vacations that weren't just visiting Aunt Sarah. Maybe even a house with a yard where Jake could actually discover a new dinosaur species instead of pretending in their apartment complex's sad strip of grass. "So what's the big news?" Jake asked around a mouthful of the fancy mac and cheese that cost more than Daniel wanted to think about. I might be getting a promotion at work. A big one. Does that mean you'll be gone more? The question hit harder than Daniel expected. Nobody. Same hours, just different responsibilities. And better pay. Good. Because you're already gone a lot. Jake said it matter-of-factly, without accusation, which somehow made it worse. But if you're happy, I'm happy. You've been kinda sad-looking lately. I haven't been sad. Yeah, you have. You get this look when you think I'm not watching, like you're somewhere else in your head. Jake speared another piece of pasta. But last night you didn't have that look. You looked like you used to before Mom left. Daniel's throat tightened. They didn't talk about his ex-wife often. She'd made her choice clear when she signed away custody without a fight. Sending birthday cards twice a year like that fulfilled some maternal obligation. You remember that? Daniel asked quietly. I remember you laughing more, playing more. Jake shrugged with the emotional intelligence that sometimes caught Daniel off guard. If the promotion makes you laugh like that again, then it's good. It's not just the promotion, Jake. Is it the girl Aunt Sarah thinks you met? There was no point in lying to a kid who already knew. Maybe. Is she nice? Very nice. Does she like dinosaurs? I don't know, but I'll ask. Okay then. Jake returned to his mac and cheese with the kind of single-minded focus usually reserved for video games. Just don't get weird about it. Adults get so weird when they like each other. Daniel laughed, the sound surprising him with its genuine happiness. I'll try not to get weird. Too late. You're already wearing nice pants. That's pretty weird. The rest of dinner passed in easy conversation about school, soccer, Jake's upcoming science project on velociraptors. Normal father-son stuff that grounded Daniel in what really mattered. The promotion, Lillian, all of it was important. But this, sitting across from his kid in overpriced restaurant lighting, this was everything. Later that night, after Jake was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Daniel found himself on the couch with his laptop, supposedly reviewing the director position's job description, but actually just staring at his phone. It buzzed at 10:47 p.m. Still awake? L. Unfortunately, you can't sleep. Keep thinking about Monday. Same. Took Jake to dinner to celebrate something that hasn't happened yet. How'd he take the news? Asked if I was dying, then demanded fancy mac and cheese. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. He also asked about you. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times. What did you tell him? That you're very nice and I'd ask if you like dinosaurs. Is that a deal breaker? If I don't like dinosaurs? Might be. Jake takes paleontology very seriously. Then for the record, I find dinosaurs fascinating and think velociraptors are underrated. You just made an 8-year-old's approval list. Good to know I'm meeting important standards. Daniel smiled at his phone, feeling the same lightness he'd felt in the restaurant. This easy banter, this comfortable back and forth. It was what he'd missed for 3 months, what he'd given up trying to maintain professional distance. Can I ask you something? L. Anything. Are you scared? Daniel considered lying, giving her the brave answer, but they'd spent Friday night being honest, and he wasn't about to stop now. Terrified. You? Beyond terrified. I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong, and I'm doing it anyway, which is either brave or stupid. Maybe both. Probably both. But I'd rather be brave and stupid with you than safe and alone. Daniel read the message 3 times, his heart doing complicated things in his chest. That might be the best argument for terrible decisions I've ever heard. I have a gift for justifying questionable choices. Is that what I am? A questionable choice? The response came immediately. You're the best choice I've made in years. The circumstances are questionable. You're not. Daniel stared at the words, feeling something shift and settle in him. All weekend, he'd been circling around the decision, weighing pros and cons, calculating risks. But Lillian's message cut through all of it with simple clarity. Monday, 8 a.m. I'm accepting the promotion. And then we're doing this properly. Properly meaning? Meaning I'm taking you to dinner somewhere that serves more than tax law conversations and fear. Is that a date, Director Mercer? That's absolutely a date, Ms. Hart. I'll have to check my schedule. Liar. Okay, fine. I'll clear my schedule. They texted until midnight about nothing and everything, movies they'd been meaning to watch, restaurants they'd always wanted to try, the mundane details of their lives that felt profound in the sharing. Daniel told her about Jake's science project and his nephew's soccer skills. Lillian told him about the book she'd been trying to finish for 6 months and her failed attempts at gardening. It was normal and wonderful and terrifying because it all rested on Monday morning going exactly as planned. Sunday morning arrived with rain drumming against the windows. Jake had a friend's birthday party at noon, giving Daniel the morning to himself. He should have been reviewing the director position materials, preparing for Monday's announcement. Instead, he found himself driving to Morrison and Associates, using his key card to access the empty Sunday Quiet building. The 15th floor was ghost town silent, just the hum of computers in sleep mode and the distant sound of the building's ventilation. Daniel walked through strategic planning, past his own desk, toward the corner office where this had all started. He found Lillian already there. She stood at her windows in jeans and a sweater, a far cry from her usual executive armor. Her dark hair was down, falling past her shoulders, and she looked younger somehow, more vulnerable. "I had a feeling you'd be here," she said without turning around. "How?" "Because I would have done the same thing in your position. Needed to see it one more time before everything changes." She finally turned to face him. "Or am I projecting?" "No, that's exactly why I came." Daniel moved into the office, the space feeling different on a Sunday, less formal, more intimate. "Needed to remind myself this is real." "Is it real?" Lillian asked quietly. "Or are we both having some kind of shared crisis?" "Does it matter?" "I suppose not." She gestured to the windows. "I was just thinking about the last time we were in this office together. Friday night feels like it happened years ago instead of 2 days." Daniel joined her at the windows, looking out at the rain-soaked city. "Marcus showed up at Jake's soccer game yesterday." Lillian's head whipped around. "What?" "His grandson's on the opposing team. He sat down next to me and basically gave me his blessing." Daniel recounted the conversation, watching Lillian's expression shift from surprise to something softer. "He really said life's too short to let fear make your decisions?" His exact words. "That's very unlike Marcus. He's usually all business, all strategy." "Maybe that's the point. Maybe he's tired of being all business." Daniel turned to face her fully. "Maybe we all are." Lillian was quiet for a long moment, her gray eyes searching his face. "I need you to understand something before tomorrow. This promotion, this opportunity Marcus is giving you, it's real. You've earned it. But it also means we can't hide behind corporate policy anymore." "I don't want to hide. I know. But there's hiding, and then there's being publicly visible. People will talk. They'll speculate. Some will say you slept your way into the promotion, even though you'll be in a completely different division. Let them talk. It won't just affect you. Jake will hear things at school events. Your reputation as a father will be questioned." Her voice was careful, measured. "I need you to be prepared for that." Daniel hadn't considered that angle. How office gossip could bleed into Jake's life. The thought made his jaw tighten. "And you?" he asked. "What will they say about you?" "That I'm a lonely widow who crossed ethical lines with a subordinate. That I used my position inappropriately. That I'm a professional liability." She said it without emotion, like she'd already cataloged every possible accusation. "I've made peace with it." "I haven't." "You will, or we won't survive this." Lillian reached out, her hand finding his. "I'm not telling you this to scare you off. I'm telling you because you need to know what you're signing up for. This isn't just accepting a promotion and going on a few dates. This is choosing to build something real while everyone watches and judges." Daniel looked down at their joined hands, thinking about Jake's question at dinner. Does she like dinosaurs? Such a simple metric for approval. He wished adult life could be measured so easily. "Jake asked about you," he said. "You mentioned that in your text. He wanted to know if you're nice, if you like dinosaurs. If I'm going to get weird about you." Daniel smiled slightly. "I told him you passed all the important tests. I haven't actually confirmed my position on dinosaurs yet. You said velociraptors are underrated." "I did say that, though I'm more of a triceratops person myself." Jake will accept that. He appreciates diverse paleontological perspectives. Lillian laughed, and the sound filled the quiet office with something light and real. Are we really having a conversation about dinosaur preferences while deciding whether to blow up our professional lives? Apparently we are. That's very us, isn't it? Mixing the profound with the absurd. Is that a bad thing? No. Lillian squeezed his hand gently. It's actually perfect. They stood there in her office, hands joined, watching rain streak down the windows while the city continued its Sunday rhythm below. Tomorrow would bring announcements and changes and uncertain territory, but right now, in this moment, it was just them. I should go, Daniel said, not moving. Jake's party is in an hour. You should, Lillian agreed, also not moving. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. 8 a.m. No backing out. No backing out. Finally, reluctantly, Daniel stepped back. Lillian's hand slipped from his, and the absence felt like cold water. Daniel, she called as he reached the door. He turned back. Thank you, she said quietly, for being brave enough to tell me the truth Friday night, for not letting me think I'd done something wrong, for choosing to fight for this instead of running away. Thank you for making it worth fighting for. He left before the moment could get any heavier, before the weight of tomorrow could crush the fragile hope they'd built. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual, the empty Sunday building stretching time and space until Daniel felt suspended between what was and what might be. In the parking garage, his phone buzzed. I forgot to mention, I like dinosaurs too. All of them, even the controversial ones. He smiled despite the nervous energy thrumming through his veins, despite the 1,000 ways Monday could go wrong. Jake will be thrilled. I'll let him know his future stepmother has excellent taste in prehistoric reptiles. The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Future stepmother? Getting ahead of ourselves, aren't we? Just planning for all contingencies? Is that what we're calling wild optimism now? I prefer strategic forecasting. Of course you do. That's very director of you. Daniel drove home through Sunday traffic, the rain easing into drizzle, his phone occasionally buzzing with messages from Lillian that made him smile like an idiot at red lights. This was what normal could look like. Easy conversation, shared jokes, the comfortable rhythm of two people learning each other, if they survived Monday. Jake's birthday party was chaos and sugar. 11 8-year-olds hopped up on cake and pizza, running through a laser tag arena like tiny caffeinated soldiers. Daniel spent 2 hours in parent observation mode, making small talk with other fathers and mothers while secretly checking his phone for messages from Lillian. How's the party? Loud, sticky. Jake just tagged me in the face with a laser gun and called it strategic warfare. Sounds intense. That's one word for it. How's your Sunday? Quiet. Reading contracts and pretending I'm not obsessively checking the clock until tomorrow. Same. Except substitute contracts with watching children destroy things. Want to get coffee after the party? Daniel's heart kicked up. They'd texted all weekend, but actually seeing each other felt different, more real, more like crossing a line they couldn't uncross. Yes. There's a place on Westbrook, small, quiet. Unlikely to have anyone from work. Sounds perfect. 3 p.m. I'll be there. The rest of the party passed in a blur of noise and movement. Jake scored the most points, naturally, and spent the car ride home explaining his tactical superiority in excruciating detail. Daniel dropped him at Aunt Sarah's for a few hours, ignoring her knowing look when he said he had an errand to run. The coffee shop was tucked between a used bookstore and a vintage clothing boutique, the kind of place that survived on ambiance and overpriced lattes. Daniel spotted Lillian immediately. She'd claimed a corner table, 2 cups already waiting. I ordered your usual, she said as he sat down. Regular coffee, black, with that judgmental look you get when people order complicated drinks. I don't have a judgmental look. You absolutely do. You had it at the holiday mixer when someone ordered a triple shot caramel macchiato with extra foam. That's not coffee. That's a dessert pretending to be coffee. See? Judgmental. But she was smiling, that real smile that cracked through her executive composure. They sat there in the corner of a coffee shop on a Sunday afternoon, and for the first time in months, Daniel didn't feel the need to maintain careful distance. He looked at her fully, Not stealing glances, not carefully timed eye contact, but actually looking.
"This is strange," Lillian said softly. "What is?" "Being able to just sit here, talk, not calculating every word or worrying about who might see us."
We're still calculating a little. True, but less. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. Tomorrow, after the announcement, this gets easier or exponentially harder. No middle ground. I vote for easier. Optimist. Realist. Marcus is on our side. HR has nothing concrete to investigate. The promotion eliminates the conflict of interest. Daniel ticked off the points on his fingers. Logically, this should work. Since when is love logical? The word hung between them. Love. Neither had said it directly before. It was too soon, too intense, too much for people who'd spent months pretending they didn't feel anything at all. Is that what this is? Daniel asked quietly. Lillian met his eyes. I don't know yet, but it could be, if we're brave enough to find out. I'm tired of being afraid. Me too. She reached across the table, her hand finding his. So tomorrow, we stop being afraid. We accept the promotion, face whatever comes, and actually try. Sounds like a plan. They talked until the coffee shop started closing, until the afternoon light faded into early evening and the weekend drew to a close. They talked about everything and nothing, work and family and the 1,000 small details that make up a life. And underneath it all was the knowledge that tomorrow would change everything. Daniel drove home with Lillian's final words echoing in his mind. Whatever happens Monday, we face it together. No running, no hiding. Deal? Deal. That night, after picking up Jake and going through the usual bedtime routine, Daniel stood in his son's doorway watching him sleep. 8 years old, already too smart for his own good, carrying his own quiet fears about being abandoned again. If this thing with Lillian imploded, it wouldn't just be Daniel's heart on the line. Jake would lose too, another person who came into their lives and left. Another reason to build walls instead of connections. But if they didn't try, if Daniel let fear win, what lesson would that teach his son? That love wasn't worth the risk? That safety mattered more than happiness? His phone buzzed with one final message. Sleep well, Daniel. Tomorrow, everything changes. L. He typed back. Tomorrow, everything begins. Then he turned off his phone, climbed into bed, and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion finally dragged him under. Monday morning arrived with pale sunshine and the weight of impossible choices. Daniel dressed in his best suit, the one he saved for important presentations, and dropped Jake at school with a hug that lasted a few seconds longer than usual. You're doing the weird thing again, Jake observed. Just nervous about work. You'll be fine, Dad. You're good at work stuff. Jake grabbed his backpack. And if you're not, we still have Aunt Sarah's couch. Thanks for the vote of confidence. That's what I'm here for. Brutal honesty and dinosaur facts. Daniel watched his son disappear into the school building, then drove to Morrison and Associates with his heart in his throat. The parking garage was already filling with Monday morning traffic. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt both too long and too short. He arrived at 7:45 a.m. Marcus's email was waiting. Conference room A, 8 a.m. You, me, Lillian, and HR. Come prepared to accept or decline. M. Daniel stared at the email, at the clinical language that would determine his and Lillian's future. Then he stood, straightened his tie, and walked toward the conference room where everything would either fall apart or finally come together. Lillian was already there, back in her executive armor, tailored suit, hair pulled back, every inch the VP of Strategic Development. But when she saw him, her eyes softened just slightly. Ready? She asked quietly. Absolutely not. Good. Me neither. Marcus entered at exactly 8 a.m., followed by Patricia Owens from HR. The conference room door closed with a soft click that sounded like finality. Let's get started, Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of decisions that would echo through all their lives. And Daniel, sitting across from Lillian with his career and his heart laid bare on the table, thought, this is it, no turning back. Patricia Owens settled into her chair with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd conducted 1,000 uncomfortable meetings. She was 50-ish, gray-haired, with the kind of neutral expression that gave nothing away. Her leather portfolio landed on the conference table with a soft thud that felt like a judge's gavel. "Thank you both for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice professionally cordial. "I understand Marcus has briefed you both on the situation." Daniel's hands were folded in his lap, hidden beneath the table where no one could see them shaking. Across from him, Lillian sat with perfect posture, her face carefully blank. Only the slight tension in her jaw betrayed any emotion. "He has," Lillian said, "though I'd like to clarify exactly what situation we're addressing." Patricia opened her portfolio, retrieving a single printed email. "Friday evening, our office received an anonymous complaint alleging inappropriate conduct between yourself and Mr. Mercer. The complainant suggested that your professional relationship had evolved beyond appropriate boundaries." "What specific boundaries?" Daniel heard himself ask, his voice steadier than he felt. "The complaint was vague on specifics," Patricia admitted. "It mentioned frequent private meetings, extended conversations of a personal nature, and what the complainant described as concerning familiarity between a VP and a direct report." "So speculation," Lillian said flatly, "not actual misconduct." "Perception matters, Ms. Hart, particularly at the executive level." Patricia's expression remained neutral. "However, before we proceed with any formal investigation, Marcus has informed me of a proposed organizational change that may render this entire matter moot." All eyes turned to Marcus, who'd remained silent until now. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers in that contemplative way that usually preceded major decisions. "Daniel, I'm offering you the Director of Data Analytics position, effective immediately. The role reports directly to me, completely separate from strategic development. It's a significant promotion with corresponding salary increase and expanded responsibilities." Marcus's gaze was steady, assessing. "The question is whether you're accepting." The moment stretched. Daniel felt Lillian's eyes on him, felt the weight of every choice that had led to this conference room, this impossible decision that was somehow also the easiest one he'd ever made. "I accept," he said clearly. Patricia made a note in her portfolio. "And you understand that this position requires immediate transition? You'd begin today, reporting structure changed, all direct ties to Ms. Hart severed professionally?" "I understand." "Then from HR's perspective, the anonymous complaint becomes irrelevant. There's no conflict of interest to investigate if no reporting relationship exists." Patricia closed her portfolio with an air of finality. "However, I need to address something directly with both of you." Daniel's stomach tightened. "The nature of the complaint, vague though it was, suggests that your professional relationship had developed personal dimensions. While that's not automatically problematic, given the timing of this promotion, there will be speculation." Patricia looked between them. "I need to know if there's any truth to those speculations. Not for disciplinary purposes, but so we can properly advise you both on how to navigate the situation going forward." Silence descended like a curtain. This was the moment. Lie and maintain plausible deniability, or tell the truth and face whatever consequences came. Daniel looked at Lillian, finding her already watching him. In her gray eyes, he saw the same calculation, the same fear, and underneath it all, the same determination that had brought them this far. Lillian spoke first. "Daniel and I became friends over the past several months. Those conversations occasionally touched on personal topics. We never acted inappropriately, never violated any company policies, and maintained strictly professional boundaries throughout." She paused, her voice dropping slightly. "But yes, those interactions developed into feelings that extended beyond professional respect." Patricia's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Understanding, maybe, or calculation. "And have you acted on those feelings?" she asked. "No," Daniel said firmly. "We recognized the ethical implications and maintained appropriate distance. That's why I avoided—" He stopped himself. "Why you avoided Ms. Hart for 3 months," Patricia finished. "Yes, several people noticed that shift. Some interpreted it as professional friction. Others drew different conclusions." "Who filed the complaint?" Lillian asked suddenly. "Anonymous complaints remain anonymous unless there's evidence of malicious intent. At this point, I see no such evidence." Patricia opened her portfolio again, this time pulling out a different document. "What I do see is 2 professionals who recognized a potential conflict of interest and handled it responsibly by not acting on personal feelings while a direct reporting relationship existed." That's a generous interpretation, Marcus observed. It's the accurate interpretation based on what they've disclosed. Patricia slid the document across to Daniel. This is your new employment contract. Director level, Data Analytics Division. Reporting to Marcus Chen. Sign it, and the investigation closes. The complaint goes in a file marked Resolved through Organizational Restructuring. Daniel stared at the contract, at the salary figure that would change his and Jake's life, at the job title that represented everything he'd been working toward. And after I sign? He asked. What then? Then you and Ms. Hart are two employees in different divisions with no professional conflict of interest. What you do on your personal time is your own business, provided it doesn't interfere with your professional responsibilities or create a hostile work environment. Patricia's expression finally cracked into something almost resembling warmth. I'd recommend discretion for the first few months, given the timing. Let people adjust to the new reporting structure before making any relationship public. But that's advice, not policy. Lillian leaned forward slightly. You're saying we're allowed to pursue a personal relationship? I'm saying that once Daniel signs this contract, there's no company policy preventing two employees in separate divisions from dating. We're not in the business of controlling our employees' personal lives. Patricia glanced at Marcus. Though I imagine your CEO has opinions on the matter. Marcus smiled slightly. My opinion is that talented people are hard to find and harder to keep. If personal happiness makes them more productive and committed to this company, then I'm all for it. He looked at Daniel. But Patricia's right about discretion. Give it a few months, let the gossip die down, then do whatever you want. Daniel picked up the pen Patricia had placed beside the contract. His hand was steady now, the shaking replaced by certainty. He signed his name in 3 places, each stroke of the pen feeling like a door opening instead of closing. Congratulations, Director Mercer, Marcus said as Daniel slid the signed contract back across the table. You start immediately. I'll have my assistant set up a transition meeting for this afternoon to review your new responsibilities. Patricia gathered her documents with brisk efficiency. I'll file my report this morning. As far as HR is concerned, this matter is closed. However, she paused at the door, looking back at them both. A piece of unsolicited advice from someone who's seen a lot of office relationships crash and burn. Be sure you're doing this for the right reasons. Attraction isn't enough. Shared trauma from navigating a complaint isn't enough. Make sure what you're feeling is real and worth the professional risk, because even with different reporting structures, people will talk. Then she was gone, leaving Daniel, Lillian, and Marcus in the suddenly quiet conference room. Well, Marcus said, standing and straightening his suit jacket, that went better than expected. Daniel, welcome to your new position. Lillian, try not to look so relieved. It's unbecoming of a VP. Noted, Lillian said dryly. Marcus paused at the door. And both of you, Patricia's advice is sound. Take it slow. Be smart. And for the sake of my ulcer, try not to give me any more Friday night heart attacks. He left. And suddenly Daniel and Lillian were alone in the conference room, the silence heavy with everything unsaid. We did it, Lillian said finally, her voice slightly unsteady. We did something, Daniel agreed. Whether it's the right something remains to be seen. Lillian stood, moving to the windows that overlooked the parking lot. Patricia's advice about discretion? She's right. We should wait. Give people time to adjust to your promotion before we start dating publicly. How long? A few months, maybe? Let the gossip settle. Let your new position become normal. Daniel joined her at the window, careful to maintain professional distance even though they were alone. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we're 2 colleagues who occasionally have coffee. Nothing scandalous. Nothing that feeds the rumor mill. Lillian turned to look at him. Can you do that? Wait a few more months after already waiting so long? Can you? I don't know, she admitted. But I know I don't want to damage your career before it even starts. You just became a director, Daniel. People are going to be watching to see if you earned it or if it was favoritism. If we immediately start dating, that answers the question for them. She was right, and Daniel hated that she was right. So we go back to being careful, maintaining distance. Not distance, just discretion. Lillian's hand moved toward his, stopped halfway. We can still talk, still get to know each other. We just do it quietly. I'm tired of quiet. I know. Me too. Her hand completed its journey,
fingers brushing his briefly before pulling back. But a few months of careful isn't the same as 3 months of avoidance. We're moving forward now, just slowly. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to say they'd already sacrificed enough to fear and professionalism. But the logical part of his brain, the part that had just accepted a director position he couldn't afford to lose, knew she was right. Okay, he said. A few months. Discreet coffee meetings and carefully worded text messages. And then? And then I take you to dinner somewhere nice, and we stop pretending this is anything other than what it is. Which is? Daniel met her eyes fully. The beginning of something that scares me and feels right in equal measure. Lillian's smile was soft, genuine. I can work with that. The moment was interrupted by Daniel's phone buzzing, a text from Marcus's assistant about the transition meeting scheduled for 2 p.m. Reality crashing back in, reminding them both that Monday morning wasn't over, that professional responsibilities still existed alongside personal revelations. I should go, Daniel said. Start figuring out what exactly a director of data analytics does. You'll be brilliant at it, Lillian said with quiet certainty. You've been doing director-level work for months anyway. Now you just get the title and salary to match. And you? How are you going to spend your Monday morning after surviving an HR investigation? Pretending to review the quarterly reports while actually processing the fact that I just helped promote the man I'm falling for and now have to wait months before I can actually date him. She said it lightly, but the weight underneath was unmistakable. Falling for? Daniel repeated softly. Too much? No, just want to make sure I heard it correctly. You heard correctly. Lillian moved toward the door, back to professional mode. Now go be a director. Show them all that Marcus made the right choice. Daniel watched her leave, her posture perfect, her stride confident, every inch the executive who just navigated a potential scandal with grace and strategy. Only he knew about the vulnerability underneath, about the woman who stayed late to avoid empty houses and who'd chosen courage over safety. The rest of Monday morning passed in a blur of introductions and transitions. Daniel's new office was 2 floors up, corner space with windows and actual furniture that didn't look like it had survived 3 decades of budget cuts. His new team, 5 analysts who looked both curious and cautious about their sudden leadership change, gathered for an impromptu meeting where Daniel tried to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. I know this transition is sudden, he told them, standing at the head of a conference table in his new territory, and I know some of you probably have questions about how I ended up here. What I can tell you is that I plan to earn this position through work, not politics. I expect excellence from this team, and I'll deliver the same in return. One of the analysts, a sharp-eyed woman named Sandra, who'd been with the company longer than Daniel, raised her hand. Will you be maintaining any connections with strategic development? The question was carefully worded, but the implication was clear. Everyone had heard something, even if they didn't know the details. My work will occasionally intersect with strategic development, as it will with every other division. But my reporting structure is completely independent, and my focus is entirely on this team and our objectives. Daniel met her eyes steadily. Any other concerns? Silence met his question, but he could feel the undercurrent of speculation. Patricia had been right. People would talk, would wonder, would draw their own conclusions regardless of the truth. The afternoon transition meeting with Marcus was simultaneously illuminating and overwhelming. The director position came with budget authority, personnel decisions, and strategic responsibilities that made Daniel's previous role look simple by comparison. You'll present directly to the board once a quarter, Marcus explained, sliding a thick folder across his desk. Data analytics informs every major decision we make, which means you're now a voice in those decisions. It's high visibility, high pressure, and high reward. No pressure, Daniel said dryly. Enormous pressure. But I wouldn't have offered it if I didn't think you could handle it. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying Daniel with that assessing gaze. How are you doing? Really? Honestly? Terrified. Grateful. Confused about whether I earned this or if it's just convenient timing. It's both, and that's not a problem. Yes, the timing solves multiple issues, but I don't make director-level appointments based solely on convenience. You've earned this position through your work over the past 3 years. The timing just happens to align with other circumstances. Marcus paused. Though, I'll be honest,
I'm gambling on you. Most new directors have a learning curve measured in months. You have about 2 weeks before your first board presentation. Daniel's stomach dropped. 2 weeks? The quarterly review is March 31st. You'll be presenting the data analytics roadmap for Q2 and projections through year end. Marcus's expression was neutral, but something gleamed in his eyes. A test, maybe, or a challenge. Think you can handle it? Every instinct screamed that this was impossible, that 2 weeks wasn't enough time to master a new role and prepare a board-level presentation. But Daniel had spent years proving himself through impossible deadlines and unreasonable demands. I can handle it, he said. Good, because the board will be watching closely. Some of them questioned this appointment, given its timing. Your presentation needs to be flawless. The weight of it settled on Daniel's shoulders. Not just the new job, but the knowledge that he was under a microscope, that every move would be scrutinized for evidence that Marcus had made a mistake. He left Marcus's office at 6 p.m., exhausted and wired in equal measure. The 15th floor, his old floor, was still bustling with late workers finishing projects and preparing for Tuesday meetings. Daniel found himself walking past strategic development, past his old desk where someone else would be sitting by week's end, toward the corner office where Lillian was undoubtedly still working. He stopped himself before reaching her door. Discretion, they'd agreed. A few months of being careful. His phone buzzed. I can see you hovering in the hallway. Either come in or stop lurking like a stalker. L. Despite everything, Daniel smiled. He glanced toward her office, catching a glimpse of Lillian at her desk, phone in hand, eyebrow raised in challenge. He pushed open her door. Stalking implies malicious intent, he said. I was simply walking past. On the wrong floor, in the wrong wing, toward my office. Lillian set down her phone. Very convincing. How was your afternoon? Tedious. Quarterly reports are somehow less interesting when you're not emotionally processing a professional crisis at the same time. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sit. Tell me about your first day as Director Mercer. Daniel sat, and for the next 30 minutes they talked about his transition meeting, the board presentation looming in 2 weeks, the team of analysts trying to figure out their new boss. Lillian listened with the kind of focused attention that made Daniel feel heard, occasionally offering advice born from her own years of navigating corporate politics. The board presentation will define you, she said seriously. They'll use it to determine whether Marcus made a strategic appointment or a personal favor. You need to be perfect. No pressure. Enormous pressure, but you can do it. Lillian's confidence in him was absolute, unwavering. I've seen your work, Daniel. I know what you're capable of. The board will too, once you show them. Will you be there? At the presentation? VPs attend all quarterly reviews, so yes, I'll be there. Her expression softened, though I'll have to pretend I'm not desperately hoping you succeed. Just pretending? Professional neutrality is very important, she said solemnly, then smiled. But between you and me, I'll be the one in the back row mentally composing your victory speech. Daniel laughed, feeling some of the day's tension ease. This, sitting in her office, talking about work and life, and the complicated space where they intersected, this felt right in a way that made all the careful planning seem worthwhile. I should go, he said reluctantly. Jake's with my sister and I promised to pick him up before dinner. How are you going to tell him about the promotion? Probably lead with the salary increase and hope he doesn't ask too many questions about why. A smart strategy. Keep the 8-year-old on a need-to-know basis. Daniel stood, pausing at the door. Lillian? Yes? Thank you for pushing me to tell the truth Friday night, for not letting me hide from this. Thank you for being worth pushing. She met his eyes across the office. Now go home to your son. And Daniel? Stop by my office less obviously next time. People will notice. Noted. He left, acutely aware that their brief conversation had probably already been noticed by someone working late, that tomorrow there would be whispers about the new director visiting his old boss's office after hours. But for tonight, he couldn't bring himself to care. Jake's reaction to the promotion news was exactly as expected. Does this mean I can get the deluxe dinosaur excavation kit? He asked immediately. Possibly. And the electric scooter? Don't push your luck. But we're rich now, right? We're more financially stable now. That's different from rich. Jake considered this while eating the pizza Daniel had grabbed on the way home. Will you still have time for my soccer games? The question hit harder than the earlier requests for expensive toys. Daniel set down his own slice, giving his son his full attention. Always, he said firmly. The promotion means better pay and more responsibility, but it doesn't mean less time with you. That's non-negotiable. Okay? Jake seemed satisfied with this answer. And the lady? The one who likes dinosaurs? What about her? Are you going to have time for her too? Or does the promotion mean you have to work too much? Daniel was continually amazed by his son's ability to cut through complexity to the heart of the matter. I'll make time. For both of you. Good. Because Aunt Sarah says you've been happier lately, and I don't want you to go back to being sad-looking all the time. I wasn't sad. You were sad-ish. Like, not crying sad, but quiet sad. Jake returned to his pizza with the casual wisdom of children who see too much. The promotion and the dinosaur lady both make you not sad, so they're both good. That night, after Jake was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with his laptop, staring at a blank document titled Board Presentation Q2 Data Analytics. 2 weeks to prove himself. 2 weeks to show that Marcus's gamble had been worth it. His phone buzzed. Still awake? L. Unfortunately, you? Reviewing contracts and thinking about discretion and how difficult it's going to be. Having regrets? About you? Never. About having to wait months to actually date you? Constantly. Daniel smiled at his phone, feeling that now familiar warmth in his chest. We could speed up the timeline, take the risk, and potentially destroy everything we've both worked for before it even begins? That's a terrible idea. But I'm very tempted by terrible ideas lately. That's my bad influence. Or your good influence, depending on perspective. I haven't made an impulsive decision in years. It's almost refreshing. Glad I could help with your impulsivity quota. They texted until midnight, about nothing important and everything that mattered. Jake's reaction to the promotion, Lillian's own board presentation scheduled for next month, the small details of their lives that felt monumental in the sharing. I should let you sleep. Big day tomorrow. L. Every day is a big day now, true. But tomorrow you start actually being a director instead of just accepting the position. That feels significant. It is. I'm terrified. Good. Fear means you care. Just don't let it paralyze you, says the woman who spent 2 years avoiding exactly this kind of risk, which is how I know paralysis when I see it, and also how I know that moving past it, even slowly, is worth it. Daniel read the message twice, feeling the truth in it. Good night, Lillian. Good night, Daniel. Don't stay up too late worrying about the board presentation. I'll try. Liar. He smiled, set down his phone, and returned to his blank presentation document. 2 weeks. 14 days to prove himself worthy of the position, of Marcus's faith, of the professional risk they were all taking. The cursor blinked on the empty page, waiting for brilliance or at least competence. Daniel cracked his knuckles and began typing, building an outline that would become a presentation that would define his career trajectory. Hours later, with dawn approaching and a solid framework finally taking shape, Daniel allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. He'd survived Monday. The promotion was real. The investigation was closed. And somewhere across the city, Lillian was probably also still awake, working late in her empty house, maybe thinking about him the way he was thinking about her. It wasn't perfect. They still had to maintain careful distance, still had to navigate corporate politics and professional boundaries. But it was progress. Forward momentum after months of careful stasis. Daniel saved his work, shut down his laptop, and finally headed to bed as the first light of Tuesday morning crept through his apartment windows. Tomorrow, today, technically, he would walk into Morrison & Associates as Director Mercer, not Senior Analyst. He would lead his team, navigate his new responsibilities, and prove that Marcus hadn't made a mistake. And in a few months, when the timing was right and the gossip had settled, he would take Lillian Hart to dinner and stop pretending that professional discretion was anything other than temporary patience before something real. His last thought before sleep claimed him was a Friday night in her office, of confessing the truth he'd spent months hiding, of the moment everything changed because they'd both been brave enough to stop running. 2 weeks until the board presentation, a few months until discretion became unnecessary, a lifetime of possibilities stretching ahead, uncertain and terrifying, and absolutely worth fighting for. Daniel fell asleep with his alarm set for 5 a.m. and hope settling in his chest like a steady heartbeat, strong and sure. And finally moving in the right direction. The 2 weeks that followed moved with the relentless momentum of a freight train, unstoppable, occasionally terrifying, and impossible to slow down even when Daniel desperately needed to catch his breath. His days blurred into a rhythm of early mornings reviewing analytics reports, afternoons managing his new team, and late evenings building the board presentation that would either validate Marcus's faith or confirm every skeptic's suspicions. Jake adapted to the new schedule with the resilience of children everywhere, though he'd started leaving sticky notes on the bathroom mirror. "Dad, remember soccer practice Thursday, and don't forget I exist," written in crayon, half-joking reminders that his son was watching, measuring whether the promotion meant losing more of his father's already divided attention. "I haven't forgotten you exist," Daniel said on Wednesday evening, finding another note stuck to the refrigerator. "That would be difficult given how much noise you make." "Just checking." Jake was sprawled on the couch, supposedly doing homework, but actually building an elaborate dinosaur diorama. "You've been doing the work brain thing a lot, where you're here but not really here." "I'm here?" "Your body is here. Your brain is thinking about spreadsheets or whatever directors think about." Jake positioned a plastic T-Rex near a carefully constructed paper volcano. "It's fine. I get it. Big important job. Just don't forget the actually important stuff." "Like what?" "Like my science presentation next Friday, and that you promised to help me make it awesome." Jake looked up from his diorama. "You did promise, right? Or did I dream that?" Daniel's heart sank. The science presentation was March 30th, the day before his board presentation. He'd completely forgotten, his mind so consumed with proving himself professionally that he'd lost track of his most important job. "I promised," he said, sitting down beside his son. "And I keep my promises, even when I'm distracted by spreadsheets." "Cool. Because Tommy's dad is helping him build a working volcano, and I need something better than that." "Better than a working volcano?" "Way better. We're doing dinosaur extinction theories, remember? I need at least 3 different catastrophe scenarios with visual aids." Jake said this with complete seriousness, as if building multiple apocalypse scenarios was perfectly reasonable. "Can we do meteors and climate change and maybe a supervolcano?" "That's ambitious." "You said I should always aim high." "I did say that." Daniel looked at the diorama taking shape on their coffee table. Continents made from cardboard, oceans sketched in blue marker, tiny dinosaurs positioned in what Jake probably considered scientifically accurate locations. "Okay, we'll make it awesome. Multiple catastrophes, visual aids, the whole thing." "Thanks, Dad." Jake returned to his positioning of prehistoric creatures. "So is the dinosaur lady going to help? Because Aunt Sarah says she's probably good at presentations." Daniel's hand stilled on the plastic stegosaurus he'd been examining. "What exactly has Aunt Sarah been saying?" "Just that you've been texting someone a lot, and that you smile at your phone now, which you never used to do, and that whoever it is makes you less boring, which she thinks is good." Jake shrugged. "I figured it's the lady you mentioned, the one who likes dinosaurs." "Her name is Lillian." "Is she nice?" "Very nice." "And she makes you happy?" "She does." "Then I don't care about the rest." Jake positioned his T-Rex in what appeared to be a hunting stance. "As long as you're still my dad, and you don't get weird about it, we're good." The simplicity of his son's acceptance made Daniel's throat tight. 8 years old and already wiser than most adults about what actually mattered. "I won't get weird about it," Daniel promised. "Too late. You're already wearing the nice pants again." Despite the chaos of his new role, despite the pressure building toward the board presentation, Daniel found moments to text with Lillian. Brief exchanges during lunch breaks, longer conversations late at night when Jake was asleep, and the world narrowed to just the glow of his phone screen and her words appearing like small gifts. "How's the presentation coming?" L. Slowly. "I've rebuilt the revenue analysis section 3 times. Why 3 times?" First version was too technical. Second was too simplified. Third is somehow both simultaneously. Send it to me. You don't have time to review my work. I have 10 minutes before my next meeting and a vested interest in you succeeding. Send it. He sent it, and 30 minutes later, well past her supposed 10-minute window, she sent back detailed notes that transformed his muddled analysis into something sharp and compelling. No explanation, no request for gratitude, just the quiet competence of someone who saw a problem and fixed it because she could. You're supposed to be maintaining professional distance. -D, I am. I'm helping a colleague prepare for an important presentation. Very professional. By spending your lunch break editing my slides. By spending my lunch break ensuring Morrison and Associates puts its best foot forward at the board meeting. Totally selfless corporate citizenship. Liar. Fine. I'm also ensuring that the man I'm falling for doesn't crash and burn in his first major presentation. But mostly the corporate citizenship thing. You said falling for again. I did. Getting less scary each time I say it. Good. Because I'm falling too, in case that wasn't obvious. It was obvious, but it's nice to hear anyway. These conversations became Daniel's lifeline. Brief reprieves from the pressure of proving himself, small confirmations that the professional risk they'd taken was leading somewhere worth going. But they were also torture, because with each exchange, the months of required discretion felt longer, more unnecessary, more like punishment than prudence. Thursday afternoon found Daniel in a strategy session with his analytics team, reviewing data models that would feed into his board presentation. Sandra, the sharp-eyed analyst who'd questioned him on his first day, was walking through market trend projections when Marcus appeared in the doorway. Director Mercer, a moment? The room went silent. Daniel excused himself, following Marcus into the hallway with his stomach already tightening in anticipation of bad news. Your presentation, Marcus said without preamble. How far along are you? 70% complete. I'm refining the forecasting models and finalizing the executive summary. Show me what you have. Now. They walked to Marcus's office in silence, Daniel's mind racing through everything that could be wrong, every way he might have already failed before the actual presentation. Marcus closed the door, gestured to the conference table, and waited while Daniel pulled up his slides on the wall-mounted screen. For 15 minutes, Marcus said nothing, just watched as Daniel walked through revenue projections, market analyses, strategic recommendations for Q2 and beyond. His expression remained neutral, giving nothing away, until Daniel reached the final slide and the silence became unbearable. You're not ready, Marcus said finally. The words landed like a punch. Sir, I have 4 days to... You're not ready because you're still presenting like a senior analyst, not a director. Marcus stood, moving to the screen. This analysis is solid. Your recommendations are sound. But you're buried in the data instead of leading with strategic vision. I thought the board wanted detailed analysis. They want confidence backed by data, not data hoping to inspire confidence. Marcus pulled up one of Daniel's slides, a dense chart showing quarterly revenue trends. This tells them what happened. What they need to know is what happens next and why they should trust your judgment about it. Daniel stared at the slide he'd spent hours perfecting, seeing it now through Marcus's eyes. Competent, but cautious. Thorough, but not commanding. Start with where we're going, Marcus continued. Lead with the vision, then support it with the analysis. You've earned this position, Daniel, but you need to present like someone who believes that. And if I don't believe it yet, fake it until you do. That's half of leadership, projecting certainty even when you're terrified you're wrong. Marcus's expression softened slightly. Look, I know the circumstances of your promotion raised questions. Some board members think I made a strategic error, that I promoted you to solve a personal problem rather than a business need. Your presentation has to prove them wrong. No pressure. Massive pressure, but you can handle it. Marcus moved toward the door, then paused. And Daniel? The board isn't just evaluating your analysis. They're evaluating whether you can handle the political complexity of being in leadership. That includes managing perception around your personal life. Daniel's stomach dropped. Has there been talk? There's always talk. Someone saw you leaving Lillian's office late last week. Someone else noticed you checking your phone and smiling during a meeting. Individually, these things mean nothing. Together, they create narrative. Marcus met his eyes directly. I told you discretion was important. I meant it. We've been careful. Careful isn't the same as invisible, and right now you need to be beyond reproach. He opened the door, clearly ending the conversation. 4 days, Director Mercer. Make them count.
Daniel returned to his office with Marcus's critique ringing in his ears and a new anxiety gnawing at his gut. He'd been so focused on getting the data right that he'd forgotten the political theater of board presentations, the performance aspect that had nothing to do with actual competence. His phone buzzed with a text from Lillian. Coffee at the usual place? 6 p.m.? Need a break from quarterly reviews. Daniel stared at the message, thinking about Marcus's warning, about perception and discretion and the invisible line between careful and careless. The smart choice was to decline, to maintain distance until after the board presentation when his position was more secure. He texted back, "Can't tonight. Jake's science project. Rain check?" It wasn't entirely a lie. He did need to work on Jake's presentation, but it was also the first time he'd actively avoided seeing her, and the decision felt like backsliding into the careful distance they'd promised to leave behind. Her response came after a long pause. "Of course. Good luck with the project." No follow-up questions, no pushing back, just acceptance that felt like disappointment wrapped in professional courtesy. Daniel spent Thursday evening helping Jake build a meteor impact scenario out of aluminum foil and cardboard, half his attention on geological catastrophe, and half wondering if he'd just made a mistake. By the time Jake was in bed, exhausted from constructing multiple apocalypses, Daniel's phone had been silent for hours. He picked it up, typed and deleted 3 different messages before settling on, "I'm sorry about tonight." The response was immediate, like she'd been waiting. "Don't apologize. You have a son and a massive presentation to prepare." "I understand. It's not just that." "Then what is it?" Daniel hesitated, then decided honesty had brought them this far. "Marcus warned me about perception, about being too visible together before the board presentation." This time the pause was longer. "He's right. We've been careless. We've been having coffee. In places where people from work might see us. Texting during meetings. I stayed late reviewing your presentation slides when I should have maintained professional boundaries." Her next message came quickly. "We talked about discretion. We haven't been discreet enough, so what are you saying?" "I'm saying we should actually wait, not just pretend to wait while finding excuses to see each other." Even through text, Daniel could hear the resignation in her words. "Your presentation is Tuesday. Mine is 2 weeks after that. We should stay completely separate until both are done." "That's 6 weeks. I know. 6 weeks of not seeing you, not talking beyond professional necessity." "Yes." Daniel wanted to argue, to say they'd already waited long enough, that 6 more weeks was asking too much. But he thought about his presentation, about the board members already skeptical of his promotion, about everything he stood to lose if he couldn't prove himself worthy of the position. "You're right. After both presentations, when there's no question about either of our performances, I hate that I'm right." "Me too. But Jake's science presentation is next Friday, the 30th. You should come." Daniel, not as my girlfriend, as a colleague who knows more about paleontology than most professionals. Jake asked if the dinosaur lady would help, and I'd like to say yes. Another long pause. "What time?" 7 p.m. Jefferson Elementary School cafeteria. Prepare yourself for 23rd graders explaining various extinction theories. I'll be there. Professionally. Of course. Very professional interest in 8-year-old science. Exactly. Corporate outreach to local education. Very on brand. Despite everything, Daniel smiled at his phone. 6 weeks of distance, but one evening where professional courtesy could excuse being in the same room, watching his son present dinosaur catastrophes while she sat in the audience pretending she was there for any reason other than the one that actually mattered. "Thank you." D, for what? For being patient, for understanding, for not making this harder than it already is. It's already impossibly hard. But you're worth waiting for, so are you. Then I'll see you Friday the 30th. Good luck with the rest of Jake's project. Good luck with your quarterly reviews. They're boring without you distracting me with nervous texts about your presentation. I'll try to be more distracting after the 31st. I'm counting on it. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Lillian. The following week crawled by with excruciating slowness. Daniel rebuilt his presentation following Marcus's guidance, leading with strategic vision instead of drowning in data.
His team noticed the intensity, the long hours, the way he rehearsed key sections until the words felt natural instead of scripted. "You're going to do great," Sandra told him on Monday, 3 days before the board meeting. "I've seen a lot of directors present, and this is better than most first attempts." Better than most isn't the same as great. True, but you've got something they didn't. You actually care about the work instead of just the promotion. She gathered her files, pausing at the door. "For what it's worth, I was skeptical when Marcus announced your appointment. The timing seemed convenient, and convenient usually means political. But watching you these past few weeks, you've earned this position. The board will see that." After she left, Daniel sat alone in his office, staring at his presentation materials and thinking about Sandra's words. Earned versus convenient, competence versus timing. The constant tension between proving himself and accepting that sometimes good things happened for complicated reasons. His phone buzzed. "How are you holding up?" "L." He smiled despite himself. They'd agreed to minimal contact, but apparently Lillian's definition of minimal included daily check-ins disguised as professional courtesy. Nervous, rehearsing, wishing it was already over. "That's normal. I threw up before my first board presentation. That's not reassuring. But I survived, and you will too. And then it's done. And you can stop proving yourself to people who should already see your value. You really think I'll do well? I think you're going to walk into that boardroom and remind everyone why Marcus promoted you. Because you're brilliant and hardworking and you care about this company in ways that can't be faked." Daniel read the message 3 times, feeling some of the nervous energy settle into something more manageable. "Thank you. I needed that. That's what I'm here for. Moral support from a professionally appropriate distance. How appropriate is this distance? Extremely appropriate. So appropriate I'm currently in my office thinking about you instead of reviewing contracts." "That sounds professionally inappropriate." "Good thing no one can read my mind then." "What are you thinking about?" "How much I miss seeing you. How 6 weeks feels like forever. How I'm counting down to Friday when I get to watch your son explain dinosaur extinction and pretend I'm there for educational purposes. You could be there for educational purposes." "I could be. But we both know I'm not." The honesty in her words made Daniel's chest ache with missing someone he'd barely had time to actually have. "Friday. Then 6 more days until your presentation. Then no more waiting." "Then no more waiting," she echoed. "Now stop texting me and finish rehearsing. You're going to be brilliant." Tuesday morning arrived with the weight of everything Daniel had been building toward. He dropped Jake at school early, endured his son's enthusiastic dinosaur-themed pep talk, and arrived at Morrison & Associates an hour before the board meeting to set up his materials and try to calm his racing heart. The boardroom was on the top floor, all windows and expensive furniture, designed to intimidate and impress in equal measure. Daniel had been in this room exactly 3 times in his career, always as a junior analyst supporting someone else's presentation. Now he stood at the head of the table, arranging his notes while board members filed in with coffee and neutral expressions. Marcus entered last, taking his seat at the far end of the table, his face carefully blank. Across from him sat Victoria Morrison, the founder's daughter and current board chair, whose reputation for demolishing unprepared presenters was legendary. She studied Daniel with the kind of assessment usually reserved for interesting specimens under microscopes. "Director Mercer," she said, her voice crisp and commanding, "we're all eager to hear your vision for data analytics. Please begin." Daniel took a breath, thought about Marcus's advice about leading with vision instead of hiding in data, and launched into the presentation that would define his professional trajectory. "The question isn't whether data drives business decisions," he began, abandoning his carefully scripted opening for something more direct. "It's whether we're using data to predict the future or just explain the past. My vision for this division is transformation from reporting to forecasting, from analysis to strategic foresight." He walked them through market trends and revenue projections, but instead of drowning in spreadsheets, he painted a picture of where Morrison & Associates could be in 2 years if they leveraged analytics correctly. When Victoria interrupted with sharp questions about methodology, he answered with confidence backed by data, not apologies wrapped in uncertainty. Lillian sat in the back row with other VPs, her expression professionally neutral, but when Daniel caught her eye briefly, he saw pride and encouragement there. 40 minutes later, he finished with a slide showing projected growth across all divisions if his recommendations were implemented. The board sat in silence, and Daniel felt his stomach drop, certain he'd miscalculated somewhere, missed something crucial. Then Victoria Morrison smiled. "That was the most compelling first board presentation I've seen in a decade," she said. "Ambitious, well-supported, and delivered with exactly the right balance of confidence and humility." She looked at Marcus. "You made the right call with this appointment." Relief flooded through Daniel so intensely he nearly swayed. Marcus nodded once, the smallest acknowledgement, but his eyes held satisfaction. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of questions and strategic discussion, with Daniel answering queries and defending recommendations until the board finally dismissed him with approving nods and actual smiles. He gathered his materials with shaking hands, the adrenaline crash already beginning. In the hallway outside the boardroom, Marcus caught up with him. "Well done, Director Mercer. That was exactly what you needed it to be." "I thought they hated it at first. The silence after I finished, that was them processing actual strategic thinking instead of the usual cautious analysis most new directors provide." Marcus clapped him briefly on the shoulder. "You proved yourself today. Enjoy it." As Marcus walked away, Daniel leaned against the wall, letting the full weight of accomplishment settle. He'd done it. Survived his first board presentation, validated his promotion, proved that Marcus's faith hadn't been misplaced. His phone buzzed. "You were magnificent. Truly brilliant. I'm so proud of you. L. Thank you for everything. For the notes, the encouragement, the belief that I could do this. You did it yourself. I just reminded you of what you already were. 5 more days until your presentation. Then we're done waiting. 5 more days," she confirmed. "I can survive 5 more days, me too. But first, there was Friday, Jake's science presentation, and the first time in weeks that Daniel would see Lillian in person, even if professional courtesy had to mask everything underneath. Friday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth and the chaos of 23rd graders preparing to explain various scientific theories to an audience of parents armed with phones and pride. Daniel helped Jake set up his tri-fold display, 3 catastrophe scenarios rendered in cardboard paint and 8-year-old determination, while scanning the cafeteria for a familiar face. Lillian arrived at 6:55, dressed casually in slacks and a sweater, looking nothing like the executive who commanded boardrooms, and everything like someone who'd chosen to spend her Friday evening at an elementary school science fair. She spotted Daniel and Jake, offered a small wave, and found a seat in the audience section with other parents and guests. Professional distance maintained, nothing to raise eyebrows or feed gossip. Jake's presentation was scheduled for 7:30. At 7:15, he grabbed Daniel's sleeve with urgent 8-year-old panic. "Dad, I forgot the volcano demonstration materials in your car." "What materials?" "The baking soda and vinegar for the supervolcano scenario." Jake's eyes were wide with catastrophic distress. "I can't show volcanic extinction without an actual eruption." Daniel checked his watch. 15 minutes before presentation time, his car parked 3 blocks away because the school lot had been full. "I'll get them," a voice said behind him. He turned to find Lillian standing there, hand already out for his keys. "You don't have to. I'm faster in these shoes than you are, and Jake needs those materials." She took the keys from his hand, her fingers brushing his briefly. "Red Civic, correct?" "Correct. But I'll be back in 10 minutes. Jake, you're going to be amazing." She smiled at his son, then disappeared into the crowd of parents with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested arguing would be pointless. Jake watched her go with open approval. "I like her. She's decisive. That's one word for her. Is she your girlfriend?" "Not yet. Someday, hopefully." "Good, because she just volunteered to sprint 3 blocks for my volcano supplies. That's girlfriend-level commitment." Daniel laughed despite his nerves. "That's very astute observation." "I'm 8, not stupid. Also, you look at her the way you look at perfectly organized spreadsheets." "I do not look at her like spreadsheets." "You totally do. Happy and satisfied, like everything's in the right place." Jake adjusted his trifold display. "It's nice. You should look like that more." Lillian returned in 8 minutes, slightly breathless, holding the forgotten supplies like precious cargo. Jake seized them with grateful enthusiasm, immediately beginning to set up his volcanic demonstration with the intensity of a scientist preparing for a crucial experiment. "Thank you," Daniel said quietly to Lillian. "Anytime. Though next time, maybe don't forget the crucial demonstration materials." "I didn't forget. Jake did. You're responsible for him. Therefore, you're responsible for his volcanic eruption." She smiled, that soft, genuine expression that made Daniel's chest ache. 5 more days. 5 more days, he confirmed. At 7:30, Jake presented his dinosaur extinction theories with the confidence of someone who'd rehearsed extensively and believed completely in his cardboard catastrophes. His meteor impact scenario involved aluminum foil and dramatic lighting. His climate change demonstration featured painted ice caps and tiny plastic dinosaurs in various states of distress. And his supervolcano eruption, accomplished with baking soda, vinegar, and red food coloring, created exactly the kind of controlled chaos that made third-grade science presentations memorable. The audience applauded. Jake beamed, and Daniel caught Lillian's eye across the cafeteria, seeing in her expression everything they couldn't say in a room full of witnesses: pride and affection, and the quiet certainty that 5 more days of waiting would be worth it. After the presentations, as parents collected projects and congratulated young scientists, Jake dragged Lillian over to explain his methodology in exhausting detail. You see, the meteor impact would have created massive dust clouds blocking sunlight, which caused plant death, which meant herbivores starved, which meant carnivores had nothing to eat. It's all connected. He pointed to his display with professional seriousness. But some scientists think it was volcanic activity instead, with ash and toxic gases doing the same thing but slower. And then there's the climate change theory, where gradual temperature shifts. Jake, maybe let Ms. Hart breathe between geological catastrophes, Daniel suggested. It's Lillian, and I'm genuinely fascinated. She crouched down to Jake's level, examining his display. Did you know some scientists think it might have been all three working together? Multiple catastrophes creating a perfect storm of extinction? Jake's eyes went wide. I didn't know that. Can I update my presentation? Science fair's over, buddy. But I could add a fourth scenario, multiple synchronized catastrophes. That's even better than 3 separate ones. Lillian laughed, and the sound was warm and real, and absolutely worth the careful distance they'd maintained. Tell you what, if your dad says it's okay, we could work on an expanded version sometime. Multiple catastrophe scenarios with full geological models. Really? Jake looked between them. Dad, can we? Daniel met Lillian's eyes, seeing the offer for what it was. Not just helping an 8-year-old with science, but finding excuses to be around each other even after the waiting ended. Absolutely, he said. Though I should warn you, Jake takes his paleontology very seriously. Good. So do I. Lillian stood, her hand briefly touching Daniel's arm in a gesture that could be friendly or could be something more. Congratulations on a brilliant presentation, Jake. You should be very proud. Thanks. And thanks for getting my volcano stuff. Dad would have taken forever. Hey, Daniel protested. It's true. You're slow when you're nervous. Jake grabbed his trifold display. Can we go celebrate? I want ice cream. It's 8:30 on a school night. I just presented groundbreaking geological research. I think that deserves ice cream. Daniel looked at Lillian, a question in his eyes. She gave the smallest shake of her head. Discretion, even now. Even at a third-grade science fair where no one from work would likely see them. Ice cream sounds perfect, Daniel said to his son. Say goodbye to Lillian. Bye, Lillian. Thanks for helping. See you when we do the expanded catastrophe project. She waved as they left, and Daniel resisted the urge to look back, to extend the evening beyond professional courtesy into something that might raise questions. In the car, Jake buckled his seatbelt with satisfied exhaustion. She's really nice, Dad, and smart. And she didn't treat me like I was just a kid. She actually listened. She's pretty special. Are you going to marry her? The question was so casually delivered that Daniel nearly rear-ended the car in front of him. That's quite a leap from helping with your science project. Not really. You look at her the way you used to look at Mom before she left, but better, because this time you look happy instead of worried. Jake kicked his feet against the seat. Also, she ran 3 blocks for my volcano. That's marriage-level commitment. We're not getting married, Jake. We're not even dating yet. But you will be, after the waiting is done. How do you know about the waiting? I hear things, and you're really bad at hiding when you're texting her. You get this specific smile. Jake looked out the window. I think it's good. You being happy, even if it means waiting and being all secret about it. Daniel drove through suburban streets toward their favorite ice cream place, marveling at his son's emotional intelligence and casual acceptance of complexity that most adults struggled with. Just so you know, Jake added, when you do start dating her for real, I'm fine with it. She likes dinosaurs, she's smart, and she makes you not sad. That's good enough for me. Thanks, buddy. That means a lot. Also, if you marry her, does that mean she'll help with all my science projects? Because that would be awesome. Daniel laughed, pulling into the parking lot. Let's get through actually dating before we start planning project collaboration. Fine, but I'm just saying, having a science-smart stepmom would be really helpful. They celebrated Jake's successful presentation with ice cream and terrible jokes, and Daniel's phone stayed silent in his pocket except for one message that came through as they were leaving. Your son is wonderful. You should be very proud. 4 more days. 4 more days, he sent back. Then everything changes. Then everything begins, she corrected. And Daniel drove home with his son, chattering about synchronized catastrophes, with Lillian's words warm in his pocket, with 4 more days standing between careful distance and whatever came next. The weekend passed. Monday brought Lillian's board presentation. Daniel wasn't in attendance, maintaining the careful separation they'd agreed upon, but he tracked the time on his watch and sent her a message when he knew it was over. How did it go? Perfectly. Victoria Morrison actually complimented my strategic vision. That's huge. I know, I'm still processing, so we're both done now, both proved ourselves. We are. So starting tomorrow, we stop waiting. Tuesday morning, Daniel arrived at work to find a message from Lillian already waiting. Dinner tonight? Somewhere nice where we can actually talk without pretending it's about quarterly reports. What time? 7 p.m. That Italian place on Westbrook you mentioned once. I'll be there. Daniel? Yes? This is a date. An actual, real, no more hiding date. I know. I'm terrified. Me too. But we're doing it anyway. We're doing it anyway, he confirmed. And that evening, after dropping Jake at his sister's house with a knowing smile and minimal teasing, Daniel drove to the restaurant where Lillian was already waiting, wearing a dress instead of executive armor, looking nervous and beautiful and absolutely worth every moment of careful waiting they'd endured. Hi, he said, sliding into the seat across from her. Hi yourself. She smiled, real and unguarded. So this is what it's like, actually being here together without calculating professional risk. It's terrifying. Completely terrifying. She reached across the table, her hand finding his, but also perfect. And Daniel, holding hands with the woman he'd spent months avoiding and weeks carefully pursuing, thought about courage and risk and the difference between hiding from fear and facing it head on. To terrible ideas that turn out right, he said, raising his water glass. To terrible ideas, Lillian echoed, clinking her glass against his. And to finally being brave enough to stop running from them. The wine arrived first, a bottle of Chianti that Daniel pretended to know something about, while the server poured with practiced elegance. Across the table, Lillian watched him with barely concealed amusement, her fingers still intertwined with his on the white tablecloth. You have no idea what you ordered, do you? She asked once they were alone. Absolutely none. I picked something in the middle price range and hoped for the best. Very strategic. That's what directors do. Make confident decisions based on incomplete information. He took a sip, finding it perfectly drinkable if completely unremarkable. How am I doing? You're doing fine. Though for future reference, I prefer whites. Future reference, Daniel repeated, testing the words. That sounds like there might be more dinners. Well, we did wait 6 weeks for this one. Seems wasteful to make it a singular event. Lillian's smile was soft, genuine, the executive armor completely absent. Unless you're planning to disappoint me so thoroughly that I never want to see you again. I'll do my best to avoid that. Good plan. The ease between them surprised Daniel. After months of careful distance and weeks of strategic separation, he'd expected awkwardness, the fumbling uncertainty of first dates. Instead, this felt like continuation, like they were simply resuming a conversation that had been temporarily paused rather than starting something entirely new. Their server returned with menus and recommendations, and they ordered pasta dishes neither would later remember clearly because the food was just background to the actual substance of the evening, finally being able to talk without calculating professional risk, without measuring every word for potential consequences. "Jake approves of you, by the way," Daniel said after their appetizers arrived. "He thinks anyone willing to sprint 3 blocks for volcano supplies has marriage-level commitment." Lillian nearly choked on her wine. "Marriage level? We haven't even made it through our first date." I tried explaining that. He's unconvinced. Apparently I look at you the way I look at perfectly organized spreadsheets, and he finds that meaningful. I don't know whether to be flattered or concerned by that comparison. Be flattered. I really love well-organized spreadsheets. She laughed, and the sound filled something in Daniel's chest that had been empty for longer than he wanted to acknowledge. This, sitting across from someone who understood him, who challenged him, who made terrible decisions feel right, this was what he'd been missing without fully realizing it. "Can I ask you something?" Lillian said, her tone shifting slightly more serious. "Anything. What scared you more? The investigation or the possibility of actually being with me?" Daniel set down his fork, considering the question with the honesty it deserved. "The investigation scared me because it threatened Jake's security. My job, our stability, everything I'd built for him." He paused. "But being with you scared me because it meant risking all of that for something intangible, something that could fail despite our best efforts. Does it still scare you?" "Terrifies me, but not enough to walk away." "Good, because it terrifies me too." Lillian leaned forward slightly. "I spent 2 years after my husband died convincing myself I was fine alone. That work was enough, that I didn't need personal connection, that being self-sufficient was the same as being whole." Her gray eyes held his. "Then you walked into that holiday mixer and reminded me what I'd been missing. And that was terrifying because it meant admitting I wasn't as fine as I'd convinced myself I was. Are you fine now?" "I'm getting there slowly." She smiled slightly. Having someone worth being terrified for helps. Their entrees arrived, and the conversation shifted to lighter territory. Jake's expanded catastrophe project, the office gossip about Marcus's grandson's improving soccer skills, the mundane details of their lives that felt profound in the sharing. But underneath it all was the knowledge that this dinner represented something bigger than pasta and wine, that they were building foundation for something neither could fully predict, but both were choosing to pursue anyway. "There's going to be talk," Lillian said over dessert, tiramisu they were sharing despite the server's offer of individual portions. "When people find out we're dating, some will say you slept your way into the promotion. Others will say I abused my position." "I know. It won't be easy. The professional scrutiny, the judgment, the constant evaluation of whether our relationship affects our work." "I know that too." "And you're still willing to do this?" Daniel took her hand again, marveling at how natural the gesture felt. 6 months ago, I couldn't even look at you without feeling guilty. 3 months ago, I was avoiding you to protect us both. 6 weeks ago, I was terrified an HR investigation would destroy everything we'd barely started. He squeezed her fingers gently. "Now, I'm sitting across from you at dinner, holding your hand in public, and the only thing I'm scared of is wasting more time being careful when we could be building something real." That's very romantic for someone who watches tax documentaries. "I contain multitudes." "Apparently so." Lillian's smile was radiant, unguarded. "So what happens now, after this dinner, after we stop hiding?" "Now we figure it out as we go, like everyone else who's ever tried this." Daniel paused. "Though I should warn you, Jake has already started planning your involvement in future science projects. Something about needing a scientifically literate stepmom for optimal research support." "Stepmom? We just established we're terrified of dating, and he's already planning family structures?" "He's an optimist, and possibly trying to secure long-term academic assistance. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes." They finished dessert while the restaurant slowly emptied around them, neither wanting the evening to end, but both aware that Jake needed to be picked up, and tomorrow was a workday and real life waited beyond this temporary suspension of careful planning. In the parking lot, Daniel walked Lillian to her car. The spring evening cool but not cold, the streetlights casting everything in amber warmth. "Thank you for tonight," Lillian said, her back against her car door, "for being brave enough to actually do this instead of just talking about it. Thank you for not letting me hide from it." Daniel stepped closer, leaving barely a foot of space between them. "Can I see you again? Officially, publicly, without pretending it's about work? I'd be disappointed if you didn't ask. This weekend, assuming Jake approves the timing and I can secure babysitting? This weekend sounds perfect." Lillian's hand came up to rest against his chest, right over his heart. "Daniel?" "Yes?" "I'm going to kiss you now, if that's okay." "That's extremely okay." She rose on her toes, closing the distance between them, and kissed him with the kind of certainty that came from months of waiting and weeks of wanting. Daniel's arms came around her waist, pulling her closer, and for a moment everything else disappeared. The professional risks, the public scrutiny, the complex navigation ahead. There was just this, just them, just the simple truth that some risks were worth taking regardless of outcome. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Lillian was smiling. "That was worth waiting for," she said. "Definitely worth it." Daniel kissed her once more, briefly. "Drive safe. Text me when you get home." "So protective already." "I'm a single dad. Protective is my default setting. I'm not complaining." She slid into her car, rolling down the window. "Good night, Daniel. Thank you for a perfect first date." "Good night, Lillian. Sleep well." He watched her drive away, then stood in the parking lot for a long moment, processing the evening, the shift from careful distance to actual relationship, the feeling that something fundamental had changed and there was no going back. His phone buzzed as he reached his own car. Home safe, still smiling. This was worth every moment of waiting. Elle agreed. "Same time this weekend?" "Absolutely. Fair warning, I'm significantly less patient now that we've established this is real." "Good. I'm tired of being patient anyway." "Then we're perfectly matched." Daniel drove to his sister's house with a lightness in his chest that felt unfamiliar and absolutely right. Sarah answered the door with a knowing smirk that suggested Jake had been talking. "So," she said, not even pretending subtlety, "how was dinner with the mysterious dinosaur lady?" "Her name is Lillian, and dinner was excellent." "Just excellent?" Jake seems to think she's already planning to be his stepmother and science project collaborator. Jake is getting ahead of himself. Or he's reading the situation accurately, and you're trying to maintain plausible deniability. Sarah stepped aside to let him in. "He's asleep on the couch. Fair warning, he made me promise to wake him when you got here so he could get a full report." "Of course he did." Jake was sprawled across the couch in pajamas, a book about velociraptors open on his chest. He stirred as Daniel approached, blinking awake with immediate alertness. "Dad, how was the date? Did you kiss her? Are you getting married? When can we do the expanded catastrophe project?" "Slow down. One question at a time." "Okay, did you kiss her?" "That's personal." "So yes, cool." Jake sat up, suddenly wide awake. "When's the next date?" "This weekend, probably." "Can I meet her? Like, officially? Not just at science fairs?" Daniel sat down beside his son, struck by the significance of the question. Jake had never asked to meet anyone Daniel had dated. Granted, there hadn't been anyone to meet in the 5 years since his ex-wife left, but this felt different, weighted with implications about permanence and family and futures neither of them could predict. "Would you want to meet her officially?" Daniel asked. "Yeah, she's cool and she makes you happy, and she understands dinosaurs. That's like all the important criteria." Jake studied his father with unsettling perception. "Plus, you're going to marry her eventually anyway, so I might as well get to know her now." "We just had our first date, buddy. Marriage is a long way off." "But you're thinking about it. I can tell." "How can you tell?" "Because you look different, less worried all the time. Like maybe you're not just surviving anymore, you're actually living." Jake said this with the casual wisdom of children who saw too much and understood even more. "That's good, Dad. You should keep doing that." Daniel pulled his son into a hug, overwhelmed by 8-year-old emotional intelligence and unconditional support. "I love you, Jake. You know that, right?" "I know. I love you too. Love you." Can we go home now? I'm tired and tomorrow's a school day and you're getting all emotional, which means you're not going to sleep anyway. When did you get so smart? I've always been this smart. You're just finally noticing. They drove home through quiet streets, Jake chattering about his upcoming science test and whether Lillian would be interested in helping him prepare a presentation on continental drift. Daniel listened with half his attention, the other half replaying the evening, the dinner conversation, the parking lot kiss, the feeling that something had fundamentally shifted in his carefully constructed life. At home, after Jake was finally asleep despite his insistence that he was wide awake, Daniel found a message from Lillian waiting. I can't stop thinking about tonight, about you, about the fact that we're actually doing this now. No more waiting, no more hiding. Having regrets already? The opposite. Having the kind of hope I haven't felt in years. Same. Jake wants to meet you officially. He has questions about continental drift. Continental drift? His next science obsession. Fair warning, he's already planning your involvement in every future academic endeavor. I'm strangely okay with that. Good. Because I think he's already attached to the idea of you being around permanently. And you? Are you attached to that idea? Daniel stared at the question, thinking about marriage-level commitment and Jake's casual certainty about futures. Daniel was only beginning to imagine, getting more attached every day. That's good, because I'm fairly certain I'm falling in love with you, and it would be inconvenient if you weren't on the same trajectory. The confession, delivered via text at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, should have felt too casual for its weight. Instead, it felt exactly right. Honest and unguarded and absolutely terrifying. I'm definitely on the same trajectory. Has been since that holiday mixer, if I'm being honest. That's 7 months of trajectory. We're practically experts at falling for each other by now. Does that mean we can skip the awkward early dating phase? Absolutely not. I want the whole experience. Awkward dinners, meeting each other's families, navigating first fights. All of it. Even the fighting? Especially the fighting. It means we care enough to disagree. You have a unique perspective on relationship milestones. I prefer to think of it as realistic optimism. Is that what we're calling it? It's what I'm calling the fact that I know this won't be easy, but I'm choosing to do it anyway because you're worth the difficulty. Daniel read the message 3 times, feeling the weight and warmth of being worth someone's deliberate choice. You're worth it too. All of it. The professional scrutiny, the complicated navigation, the risk that this could fail spectacularly. Then we're agreed. We're doing this, complications and all. We're doing this. Good night, Daniel. Dream of something better than spreadsheets. I'll dream of you, which is arguably better than spreadsheets. Arguably? Definitely better. Significantly better. Best possible thing to dream about. Better. Good night. The following weeks unfolded with the kind of careful momentum that came from building something real while maintaining professional boundaries. Daniel and Lillian dated openly but discreetly, dinners at restaurants across town, weekend mornings at farmers markets, careful separation at work that fooled exactly no one but satisfied corporate policy. The gossip came, as they'd known it would. Whispers in break rooms about the convenient timing of Daniel's promotion. Speculation about whether their relationship predated the organizational restructuring, pointed questions disguised as casual conversation. Daniel weathered it with the same focused determination he'd applied to his board presentation, proving through work that his position was earned regardless of personal circumstances. Marcus called him into his office 6 weeks into the relationship, closing the door with the kind of deliberate care that signaled serious conversation. "How are things progressing?" he asked without preamble. "With data analytics, the Q2 projections are ahead of schedule and we've implemented with Lillian." Daniel paused, recalibrating. "Things are good. We're taking it slowly, being professional at work, keeping personal and business appropriately separated." "That's not what I asked." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "I asked how things are progressing, whether this risk we all took is turning into something worth the professional complications." "It is," Daniel said simply. "She's worth it. We're worth it." "Good. Because the board notices things, and right now they're noticing that 2 of our best performers are dating. Some think it's a liability. Others think it's irrelevant as long as the work stays excellent." Marcus's expression was neutral. "Make sure the work stays excellent." "It will." I know. That's why I'm not worried. Marcus gestured toward the door, clearly ending the conversation. Just remember, I took a professional risk promoting you under those circumstances. Don't make me regret it. I won't, sir. I know you won't. Now get out of my office and go do whatever directors do when they're not being interrogated by their CEOs. Daniel left with renewed determination to prove that personal happiness and professional excellence weren't mutually exclusive. That choosing love didn't mean sacrificing competence. The expanded catastrophe project happened on a Saturday in May, with Jake setting up elaborate geological models across Daniel's living room, while Lillian provided scientific consultation that was probably far beyond third-grade requirements, but delighted Jake enormously. So the Deccan Trap's volcanic activity lasted approximately 30,000 years, she was explaining, helping Jake paint a massive cardboard volcano. Which means the extinction wasn't sudden. It was this slow accumulation of environmental stress combined with the meteor impact. Synchronized catastrophes, Jake said with satisfaction. I knew it. Multiple disasters creating perfect extinction conditions. Exactly. You're going to blow every other third grader out of the water with this analysis. That's the plan. Jake positioned tiny plastic dinosaurs around his volcano with scientific precision. Dad, can Lillian come to the presentation when I present this at school? Daniel looked up from where he was attempting to construct a meteor impact crater from papier-mâché. That's up to Lillian. She might be busy with work. I can probably make time for groundbreaking geological research, Lillian said, meeting Daniel's eyes with a smile. When is it? Next month, June 15th. It's the end-of-year science showcase. Jake didn't look up from his dinosaur arrangement. All the parents come, you should come too, since you're basically family now. The casual declaration hung in the air. Daniel's hand stilled on the papier-mâché, and Lillian's paintbrush paused mid-stroke. Jake, Daniel started. What? You've been dating for like 2 months. You're together all the time. She helps with my homework and knows about my dinosaur obsessions and makes you smile at your phone. Jake finally looked up, expression matter of fact. That's family. Not official married family yet, but still family. Lillian set down her paintbrush carefully. Jake, that's very sweet, but family is a big word. I know. I'm not stupid. He returned to positioning his dinosaurs. I'm just saying you're important to us, both of us. So you should come to my science showcase because that's what important people do. Daniel caught Lillian's eye, seeing his own emotion reflected there, touched and overwhelmed and slightly terrified by 8-year-old certainty about things adults spent years debating. I'll be there, Lillian said softly. Wouldn't miss it. Cool. Now help me figure out how to show atmospheric ash distribution. I'm thinking cotton balls spray-painted gray, but I'm open to suggestions. The rest of the afternoon passed in creative chaos, with volcanic eruptions and meteor impacts rendered in household materials and scientific enthusiasm. And when Jake was finally satisfied with his synchronized catastrophe scenarios, Lillian helped clean up while Daniel ordered pizza and tried not to think too hard about the word family and what it meant that his son had already decided she belonged in theirs. Later, after Jake was asleep and they were alone in the kitchen, Lillian brought it up. He really thinks of me as family already. He does. Is that too much pressure? It's terrifying, she admitted, but also kind of wonderful. I never had kids with my husband. We kept saying we'd wait for the right time, and then the right time never came. She leaned against the counter. I didn't think I'd get another chance at this. At being part of a family, at mattering to a child. It's overwhelming. You don't have to, I want to, she interrupted. That's what scares me. I want this you, Jake, the science projects and soccer games and casual Saturday afternoons. I want all of it. Daniel moved closer, pulling her into his arms. Then take it. We're offering. Just like that? Just like that. Jake's right. You're already family in all the ways that matter. We're just waiting for the rest to catch up. She kissed him then, soft and certain, and Daniel thought about trajectory and falling and the difference between being scared of something and being scared enough to walk away from it. June arrived with early summer heat and the science showcase that Jake had been preparing for with single-minded intensity. The school gymnasium was transformed into a gallery of third-grade scientific achievement, with projects ranging from simple volcano demonstrations to Jake's elaborate synchronized catastrophe scenarios, complete with multiple visual aids and a 5-page written analysis that Lillian had helped him edit. Daniel and Lillian arrived together, no longer hiding their relationship, but still aware of the scrutiny that came with being the talked-about couple from Morrison and Associates. But tonight wasn't about office politics or professional boundaries. It was about an 8-year-old who'd worked tirelessly on geological models and deserved their undivided attention. Jake spotted them immediately, waving frantically from his display station. "Dad! Lillian! Come see! I added the atmospheric modeling you suggested." They spent the next hour listening to Jake explain his theories to judges, teachers, and other parents with the kind of confident enthusiasm that made Daniel's chest ache with pride. And when Jake won first place in his grade level, accepting his ribbon with a gap-toothed grin, Lillian's hand found Daniel's and squeezed tight. "He's amazing," she whispered. "He is. Takes after his old man. Debatable, but I'll allow it." After the ceremony, Jake dragged them both to celebrate with ice cream, his traditional victory ritual that Daniel suspected was less about celebration and more about maximizing dessert opportunities. They sat in a booth at the same shop where Daniel and Jake had celebrated the promotion months earlier, and Jake talked non-stop about expanding his research into other mass extinction events. The Permian-Triassic extinction was way bigger than the dinosaurs, he explained around mouthfuls of chocolate ice cream. Like 96% of all marine species died. That's almost everything. We should do a project on that next. "We?" Lillian repeated, eyebrow raised. "You're my science consultant now. It's official. You can't back out just because the dinosaurs are extinct." "I wouldn't dream of it." Daniel watched them banter about ancient catastrophes and research methodology and felt something settle in his chest. Certainty, maybe. Or just the quiet recognition that this, exactly this, was what he'd been missing without knowing it. Not just romance or companionship, but family in the truest sense. People who chose each other deliberately, who built something together out of shared interest and genuine affection. That night, after dropping Jake at home and returning Lillian to her car, Daniel found himself unable to let the evening end. "Come back to my place?" he asked. "Just for a while. Jake will be asleep soon, and I'm not ready to say goodnight yet." "Okay," she said simply. They sat on his couch with coffee. Neither of them drank, talking about nothing and everything. The science showcase, Jake's growing attachment to her, the way their relationship had evolved from careful distance to easy intimacy. "I need to tell you something," Lillian said eventually, setting down her untouched coffee. "And it's going to sound too soon, too fast, too much. But I've spent enough of my life not saying things that mattered, and I don't want to do that with you." Daniel's heart kicked up. "Okay. I love you." She said it clearly, directly, without hedge or qualification. "I'm in love with you, with your son, with this life we're building together. And I know it's only been a few months, and conventional wisdom says we should wait longer before saying things like this. But I watched you tonight with Jake, saw how proud you were, how present you are in his life despite everything else demanding your attention. And I thought about how you've made space for me in that life, how you've trusted me with your son's heart and your own." She paused. "So I love you, and I needed you to know that." Daniel pulled her close, his own heart too full for careful words. "I love you too. Have loved you since that Friday night in your office when you demanded to know why I wouldn't look at you. Maybe even before that. That's very romantic for someone who watches tax documentaries, I know. You've mentioned." He kissed her softly. "But loving you is easy. Easier than anything else I've done in years. Even easier than data analytics board presentations. Significantly easier. And with better outcomes." She laughed against his lips, and they stayed like that for a long time, wrapped together on his couch, while the night deepened outside and Jake slept peacefully down the hall, secure in the knowledge that his father had found something worth keeping. The months that followed built on that foundation with steady, deliberate momentum. Daniel and Lillian dated openly, their relationship now acknowledged fact rather than speculated rumor. The office gossip faded as their work continued to excel, as quarterly presentations proved competence regardless of personal circumstances, as Marcus's gamble validated itself through results rather than justification. Jake's relationship with Lillian deepened through shared science projects and weekend outings, through patient explanations of continental drift and enthusiastic discussions about prehistoric marine life. She attended his soccer games and helped with homework, carved out space in her carefully constructed post-widowhood life for an 8-year-old with dinosaur obsessions and endless questions. And somewhere in that progression from careful dating to integrated lives, Daniel realized they'd stopped discussing whether this would work and started assuming it already had. The conversation about marriage happened on an October evening, a year and a half after that first confession in Lillian's office. They were at her house. She'd finally sold the 2 large homes she'd shared with her late husband and bought something smaller, more manageable, more suited to a life moving forward rather than preserving the past. Jake was at a friend's house for a sleepover, giving them a rare evening alone without parental responsibilities. "I've been thinking," Lillian said, curled against Daniel on her couch, "about futures and families and what comes next. Heavy thoughts for a Friday evening. Maybe, but important ones." She shifted to face him fully. "Jake asked me last week if I was going to be his stepmom or if we were just going to date forever." "What did you tell him?" "I told him that was up to you and me to decide together. Then he informed me that I should probably make a decision soon because he's tired of explaining our relationship status to his friends." Daniel laughed. "That sounds like Jake." He also said, and I'm quoting directly here, "Dad's going to ask you to marry him eventually, so you might want to think about your answer." Lillian's gray eyes held his. "Any truth to that statement?" "Depends." "On what?" "On whether you'd say yes." The question hung between them, not quite a proposal, but close enough to matter. "Yes," Lillian said simply. "I would say yes. To marriage, to being Jake's stepmom, to building this life we've been carefully constructing for the past 18 months. All of it, yes." Daniel kissed her with the kind of certainty that came from knowing exactly what he wanted and being brave enough to reach for it. "Then I'm asking, not officially yet. I should probably get an actual ring and do this properly. But I'm asking. And I'm answering. Yes, absolutely yes." They sat there in her living room, officially engaged in everything but name, and Daniel thought about trajectory and falling and the difference between taking risks and making choices. This, Lillian, Jake, the family they'd built from careful courage and deliberate hope. This was choice in its purest form. The official proposal happened 2 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon at the Natural History Museum. Daniel had arranged it with Jake's enthusiastic collaboration, a private tour of the paleontology section, culminating in the dinosaur exhibit where Jake had positioned himself as lookout, while Daniel got down on one knee in front of a T-Rex skeleton. "Lillian Hart," he said, ring box open, heart pounding. "Would you marry me and officially join our family of dinosaur enthusiasts and spreadsheet lovers?" "That's the worst romantic proposal I've ever heard," she said, tears already streaming down her face. "Is that a no?" "It's absolutely a yes, but we're working on your romantic phrasing." Jake appeared from behind a display case, whooping with 8-year-old enthusiasm. "She said yes. Can I tell people now? Can I call her mom? When's the wedding? Can we have dinosaur decorations?" "Slow down, buddy," Daniel said, standing and sliding the ring onto Lillian's finger. "One question at a time." "Okay. Can I call her mom?" Lillian crouched down to Jake's level, her hand with its new ring catching light from the museum displays. "You can call me whatever feels right. Mom, Lillian, something else entirely. I'm not trying to replace your birth mother. I'm just trying to be here for you, whatever that means. My birth mother left when I was 3 and sends birthday cards twice a year. You actually show up." Jake said this with matter-of-fact certainty. "So yeah, Mom works, if that's okay." "That's more than okay." Lillian pulled him into a hug while Daniel watched, his throat too tight for words. "That's perfect." They married 6 months later in a small ceremony attended by family, close friends, and select colleagues who'd watched their relationship evolve from scandal to love story. Marcus gave a toast about taking risks and choosing courage, about how the best professional decisions sometimes wore personal faces. Jake served as ring bearer with solemn dignity, only slightly undermined by his dinosaur-themed boutonniere that Lillian had insisted upon. At the reception, Daniel found Lillian alone for a moment, stealing time between toasts and cake cutting. "Happy?"
he asked. Deliriously. You? Beyond words. He pulled her close, swaying to music that was too faint to properly dance to. Thank you. For what? For not letting me hide, for being brave when I was terrified, for choosing us even when it was complicated and risky and absolutely insane from a professional standpoint. Thank you for being worth the risk. She kissed him softly. And for having a son who appreciates proper paleontological research. That was purely accidental. I'll take it anyway. Jake appeared at Daniel's elbow, tugging his sleeve with urgent 8-year-old energy. Dad, they're about to cut the cake, and I need to make sure it's the dinosaur one we ordered, because if it's not, I'm staging a protest. It's definitely the dinosaur cake. I'm going to verify that personally, for quality control purposes. Jake darted off toward the cake table, leaving them alone again. Our son is very thorough, Lillian observed. Our son's, Daniel repeated, testing the words. That sounds good. It sounds perfect. They stood there at their own wedding reception, watching Jake negotiate cake logistics with the caterer, surrounded by people who'd supported them through professional scrutiny and personal courage, and Daniel thought about the question that had started everything. Why won't you look at me? That simple question in Lillian's office, delivered on a Friday evening when they'd both been too exhausted to maintain careful distance, had cracked open everything he'd been hiding from. The fear, the attraction, the terrifying possibility that feeling alive again might be worth the professional risk. And now, 18 months later, he stood at his wedding reception with a ring on his finger and a family built from deliberate courage, and he couldn't imagine having made any other choice. What are you thinking about? Lillian asked, watching him with that soft expression he'd learned meant she was reading his thoughts with unsettling accuracy. About Friday nights in your office, about confessions that changed everything, about how answering one question honestly led to all of this. Best answer you ever gave. Best question you ever asked. Jake returned with cake logistics successfully verified, and they spent the rest of the evening celebrating with their community, colleagues who'd become friends, family who'd supported them through complicated navigation, the 8-year-old who'd accepted Lillian into their lives with casual certainty that adults could learn from. Later, much later, after the reception ended and Jake was staying with Daniel's sister for the weekend, and they were finally alone in the hotel room that would start their honeymoon, Lillian stood at the window looking out at the city lights. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just kept avoiding me? She asked. If you'd never answered that question honestly? Daniel joined her at the window, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. Sometimes, but then I remembered that avoiding you was slowly killing something in me. The careful distance, the professional boundaries, the constant calculation of risk versus reward. He kissed her temple. I'd rather have this complicated and risky and absolutely worth it than spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. Good answer. She turned in his arms to face him. Because I plan to spend the rest of our lives reminding you why honesty was the right choice. I'm counting on it. Years later, when people asked how they met, Daniel and Lillian would tell the story with practiced ease, colleagues who became friends, who became more, navigating corporate policy and personal courage to build something real. They'd mention the holiday mixer, the months of careful distance, the Friday evening confession that changed everything. But privately, between themselves, they remembered it differently. They remembered the fear that had nearly kept them apart, the professional risk that had seemed insurmountable, the choice to be brave when every logical instinct screamed for safety. Jake grew up with that story, with parents who'd chosen each other deliberately despite complications, who'd proven that courage and calculation weren't mutually exclusive. He learned that love required risk, that families came in many forms, that sometimes the best decisions felt terrifying in the moment, but right in hindsight. And when he was older, when he brought home his own complicated relationships and uncertain choices, Daniel would tell him what he'd learned in Lillian's office that Friday evening, that the scariest questions often led to the best answers, that vulnerability was strength disguised as weakness, that being brave enough to be honest could change everything. But that was years ahead. For now, on their wedding night, Daniel and Lillian stood at a hotel window watching city lights while their son slept safely at his aunt's house, secure in the knowledge that his father had found partnership and his family had grown,
in all the ways that mattered.
I love you, Lillian said softly.
For being brave enough to tell me the truth, for not letting fear win, for building this life with me.
I love you too, Daniel replied.
For asking the question, for not accepting my careful distance, for being worth every professional risk and personal fear. They stayed there for a long time, wrapped together against the night, thinking about Friday evenings and honest confessions and the simple question that had started everything. Why won't you look at me? And the answer that had changed 2 lives, built a family, and proved that sometimes the bravest choice was also the right one. The story that had begun with avoidance and fear had evolved into love and certainty. The professional risk had transformed into personal reward. The careful calculation had given way to deliberate courage, and Daniel Mercer, standing in a hotel room with his wife on their wedding night, finally understood what Marcus had tried to tell him all those months ago. That life was too short to let fear make decisions, that the brave choice and the right choice were often the same thing, that some risks were worth taking regardless of outcome. He'd taken the risk. They both had. And they'd won everything that mattered.